Chapter 1563. On the way back, Kumiya Ryoko sat in the front passenger seat and looked at the excited Josie through the rearview mirror from time to time. She was keenly aware that Josie's eyes had been glued to Audra ever since he got in the car. "Didn't you always think the front passenger seat wasn't spacious enough? Why are you sitting next to me?" Not long after they set off, Audra suddenly laughed. He looked straight ahead and only glanced out of the corner of his eye at the girl next to him, who had her arms crossed and her head slightly raised like a black swan. "I'll sit wherever I want, humph." Kumiya Ryoko turned to look out the window, but her eyes never left Josie in the back seat through the reflection in the window, as if she was deep in thought. To be honest, she didn't dislike Josie. Even after meeting Josie for the first time, he felt great admiration for Josie's courage to smile at life. But for some reason, she felt uncomfortable when she saw Josie's gaze on Audra. She was very clear that that gaze was definitely not a gaze of love, but a pure admiration for her idol. But no matter how much she persuaded herself, Kumiya Ryoko still felt as if her heart was blocked, and she couldn't calm down. Ever since she had hired Audra as a bodyguard, she found that she had become more and more abnormal. With both hands on the steering wheel, Audra stared at the sulking girl next to him and couldn't help laughing in his heart. Ryoko was too cute. This girl couldn't hide her temper. She thought she was very mature, but in fact, her inner thoughts were written all over her face. Audra had in fact already decided on the idea of bringing Josie back. On one hand, it was to better complete his task, and on the other hand, it was to provoke Kumiya Ryoko. He had already gotten a good grasp of the girl's temper recently. If Josie had been a girl, she would probably have already started acting weird. It was precisely because Josie was a boy, and a disabled one at that, that this girl couldn't say a word now. Even if she was a little jealous, she could still sulk on her own. She was actually jealous of a boy, and a disabled one at that. For Kumiya Ryoko, it was too unbecoming of her to say this out loud. "I'll cook some home cooking tonight." After driving for a while, Audra gripped the steering wheel and tried to break the deadlock in the car. Josie knew how to read people's expressions, and he also knew that Ryoko Kumiya was actually unhappy. However, given the current situation, he didn't dare to say anything. Obediently keeping his mouth shut was the best choice. There was no way Audra would let Josie be embarrassed alone. It was his duty to lighten the mood. "Do you have any favorite dishes?" Audra asked. I'm not a picky eater. I'll just eat with big brother and sister-in-law." Josie was a little embarrassed. After he said this, he instinctively wanted to see Kumiya Ryoko's reaction, but strangely, the girl in the passenger seat didn't move at all. Previously, when the girl was at his house, she had tried her best to deny this relationship. In the end, there was a feeling of tacit agreement. Out of the corner of his eye, Audra glanced at the girl, who looked like she had already fallen asleep, and curled his lips. "Your sister-in-law is asleep." As soon as she said that, Ryoko's lips twitched. "Oh, sister-in-law has fallen asleep." Josie's expression of sudden realization was extremely exaggerated. He couldn't help snickering in his heart. This Josie was smarter than he had imagined. He had actually already guessed that Ryoko was faking her sleep. But he didn't directly expose him, and at Audra's hint with his eyes, continued to cooperate with the rest of the performance. Just tell me what you want to eat." "In any case, your sister-in-law is asleep and won't mind," Audra said in a low voice. Josie understood and hurriedly lowered his voice as well. The current situation between the two of them really looked like they were taking care of the sleeping Kumiya Ryoko, so they lowered their voices. In fact, their voices weren't too low. There wasn't much space in the car, so Ryoko could still hear them clearly. "Then what does sister-in-law usually like to eat?" "Your sister-in-law is afraid of getting fat and likes to eat bland food. But she's actually afraid that if she eats too bland, she won't be able to get enough nutrition." Audra looked at Ryoko's flat mouse pad and said, "Actually, her favorite dishes are spicy chicken and duck blood curd." "I see." Josie smiled, his eyes full of envy. "Ah, that's great. Z, have you ever had a girlfriend? Audra asked. I'm a disabled person, how could anyone like me? Josie shrugged helplessly. The teachers and classmates at school take good care of me, at least on the surface. But there are always discussions in private. What do they say about you? They say how a disabled person like me could get into Sword God Academy. It's probably something along those lines. You're not angry? There's nothing to be angry about. Josie said, sometimes, a lot of people don't want to hear your excuses, they just want to enjoy the pleasure of arguing with you. That makes sense. Audra was secretly surprised by Josie's maturity. Your sister-in-law also often argues with me at home. You two are different. Husband and wife quarrel at the head of the bed and reconcile at the end. The more you argue, the better your relationship, Josie said. As he spoke, he was observing Ryoko's expression the whole time. In this short conversation, he kept calling her sister-in-law, and the corners of Ryoko's mouth and eyes twitched non-stop as he kept calling her sister-in-law. Even Josie started to become curious about how much longer Ryoko could hang on. But as the saying went, you could never wake up a person who was pretending to be asleep. As long as Ryoko didn't want to wake up, it wouldn't matter how excessive their next topic was. If she woke up and retorted now, how awkward would that be? Audra was clearly aware of this, and he started to step on the accelerator and abruptly increase the speed. Z, he suddenly said at that moment. Brother Joie, what is it? Josie understood and asked cooperatively. The two of them immediately echoed each other and began to sing the same tune. I was just thinking, if I had married a little earlier, would my son be about the same age as you? Josie couldn't help laughing on the spot. Brother Joie wants to be my father? Godfather? Godfather or whatever, that's too much. I think I can be your Shifu. A teacher for a day is a father for life. Then I'll be your son from now on. If you were my son, then the one next to you wouldn't be your sister-in-law right now. We're now a standard family of 3 in this car. A family of 3. I get it. Josie bowed on the spot to Ryoko in the front passenger seat. Greetings, esteemed mother. At that moment, Ryoko suddenly opened her eyes and clenched her 2 little fists tightly as she shouted, Who's your esteemed mother? Her. I can't take it anymore, what the hell is this? The more she said, the more outrageous it became. Chapter 1564. Yes, Shifu, I've brought classmate Z back. He's a very obedient and sensible child. He and I get along very well. Also, Immortal Toya will personally visit him tomorrow for the operation. In short, Shifu, please rest assured about Z's situation. All the people who were monitoring classmate Zhou's family have been arrested, and none of them have been released. Battle Sex Koan has already mobilized his connections in Mishio Nation to take action against the foreign companies that are interfering with the 9 paths. I believe we'll have results in a few days. Also, Shifu, there's one more thing. Forget it, Shifu, go do what you need to do. When Shifu comes back to China, I'll personally pay him a visit. Josie had never thought that there would come a day when he would. He could go live in Audre's house for a while. In this world, there were 2 men he respected the most. The first person he worshipped was his father. And the second was Audre. The former was his life support, and the latter was his spiritual pillar. In the car earlier, he and Audre had worked together seamlessly and tacitly. For a moment, Josie really felt like Audre's disciple. But Josie was also well aware. Being Audre's disciple might be an extravagant hope. If he was joking, if he was serious, he would lose. After returning to the apartment, Audre could clearly sense that Josie's mood seemed to be a little gloomier than before. He knew what on earth was going on in the little guy's head. In fact, what they had said in the car just now hadn't all been a joke. Audre also had his own plans. But taking in a disciple was, after all, a big deal. There was no way he would accept it just like that. Thus, in the end, Wang Ling had to agree to it. Zhuo was in the kitchen chopping vegetables around his apron. At that moment, he suddenly poked his head out and took the initiative to talk to Zhou Zi. "Zi, can you come over and help me?" "Of course." Zhou Zi, who had been scared out of his wits, readily agreed. "Do you know how to cut vegetables?" Zhuo moved a chair so that Zhou Zi could stand steadily on it. "Yes." Zhou Zi nodded. Even if he had lost both his legs, he was still very capable of taking care of himself. When Zhou Zi was alone at home, he usually cooked himself. "Shredded or diced?" "Shred the cucumber and dice the carrots. Mince the chili over there and help me peel the potatoes." "All right." "Young man, you're quite capable," Zhuo praised him. Zhou Zi blushed. He felt that there was no hope for him. Just a simple compliment was enough to make him feel extremely happy. Kiya Ryoko hugged her pillow and looked in the direction of the kitchen. He looked at Zhou Zi with hostility. In the car earlier, this little guy and Zhuo had joined forces to tease her. She would remember this. Kamiya Ryoko pressed the remote control. On the surface, she pretended to be fine, but she was very annoyed in her heart. He didn't pay attention to any of the programs. When the program switched to the TV drama channel, a familiar line came from the channel: "You only lost your legs, but she lost her love." Kamiya Ryoko was speechless. Zhou Zi, Zhuo, at the same time, the closed-door competition between the 9 Paths and the National High School students was about to begin. The prize for first place was 1 million Sun Island dollars. Converted into Huaxiao's currency, it was equivalent to more than 60,000 at the exchange rate. This prize might not seem like much to other people, but it was especially important to Wang Ling. The contestants who had been selected as part of the school delegations for this competition wouldn't be too bad in terms of overall strength and family conditions. Apart from Wang Ling, almost no one was aiming for the prize money. Personal honor and the school's honor were more important. The 9 Paths and the Office of Academic Affairs, Yuki Junshan, were worried about the public opinion that had erupted today. He vaguely had a suspect in his heart. He knew who was playing tricks behind the scenes. Zhou Xiang. After thinking it over, Yuki Junshan could only think of this person. Whoever started the trouble had to end it. If he wanted to reverse public opinion, he would probably have to get Zhou Xiang to make a concession and speak up for the Office of Academic Affairs. Yuki Junshan had in fact already prepared for this. When the phone rang, Yuki Junshan was finally waiting for the signal to act. "Is everything ready?" "Very good, then, please invite teacher Zhou Xiang to my office. It's time to talk to him." Zhou Xiang actually hadn't expected Yuki Junshan to find him so quickly. But this time, his confidence was different. In the past, his biggest worry had been his son. Now, Zhou Zi's problem had been completely solved. He had nothing to be afraid of. With eldest Miss Sun's help, Yuki Junshan would probably never have dreamed of the resources his son would enjoy in the future. And now, Zhou Xiang had Huaguo Water Curtain Group and Battle Sect working together to support him. One was a large, world-renowned elixir conglomerate, while the other was a globally recognized super sect that had risen to prominence in recent years and had official backing. When he returned to the country this time, he would also receive a special invitation from the War Sect to teach language at the War Sect. The salary and benefits would be 20 times higher than what 9 Paths and the 9 Paths were offering. Not only that, the people in charge of the Battle Sect also promised that they would provide him with a mountain. In the future, apart from teaching him language, they would also pass on knowledge of cultivation history. This was a course specially designed for children who had no talent but were determined to contribute to the human cultivation cause. It wasn't just Battle Sect. Other schools actually had similar courses and teachers who specialized in this area. Cultivation wasn't just about improving one's level and knowing how to use all kinds of fancy spells and magical equipment. It was also very important to pass on the culture and history of the cultivation sect. Among modern cultivators, as long as they had some achievements in cultivation history and culture, even if they had low or no cultivation level, they would be treated just as well. The treatment they received was no less than that of cultivators with higher levels. Battle's sect was a sect that had blossomed in all aspects. Chinese and history courses had long been in the process of preparation, but Zhou Xiang's appearance just happened to speed up the process. Of course, it wasn't just because they wanted Zhou Xiang to make a decision as soon as possible. It wasn't just because they wanted Zhou Xiang to make a decision as soon as possible. It was because Zhou Xiang himself was indeed a talent worthy of these resources. Zhou Xiang was clearly a lot more confident when he came to Yuki Junshin's office again. He no longer had to bow and scrape like those lowly animals who had to endure Yuki Junshin's disdainful looks. After entering the office, he sat on the sofa and crossed his legs, looking completely fearless. Yuki Junshin and Holland, the board member of the foreign corporation next to him, were both shocked by this action. Yuki Junshin sneered. "Mr. Zhou, are you planning to give up now?" He hadn't asked anything, but Zhou Xiang was acting like this in front of him. Yuki Junshin's suspicions were finally answered. "You've privately spread a religion that doesn't conform to the school's culture. You're already suspected of illegally spreading religion. According to the laws of this country, you can be detained." Yuki Junshin threatened. Religion? Zhou Xiang couldn't help but laugh. The Grey Sect. Apart from the word sect, it's written the same way as a religion. Which part of it has anything to do with religion? It's just a student literary club. Do you think your sweet words will work? Zhou Xiang. Yuki Junshin snorted. "If you're detained for breaking the law, you'll also be fired by the school. What will happen to your disabled son if you lose your income? Have you ever thought about that? So, you're threatening me with my son?" At this moment, Zhou Xiang could only sigh at his decisiveness back then. Fortunately, Leek Sasaki had found him ahead of time and expressed his willingness to cooperate with Zhangzong and Huagua Water Curtain Group, otherwise, he really would be pinned down by others like this. His son was his lifeline. But now, his biggest weakness had been completely dealt with. Zhou Xiang said, "Yuki Junshin, you really are a sinister villain. My son often tells me that someone is watching him when he sleeps at night. They should be the people you sent, right?" Yuki Junshin laughed. "Since you know what I'm up to, I really don't know why you're still pretending to be tough. Mr. Zhou Xiang, you can't leave the 9 paths and their treatment. Then you might as well make another call and ask if the people you sent to watch him are still there." Zhou Xiang spread his hands indifferently. Yuki Junshin frowned slightly. He thought of Zhou Xiang's uncharacteristically tough behavior today and began to worry about the situation over there. It can't be, Yuki Junshin thought worriedly. He had clearly spoken to the informant over there just now, and the informant had said that the situation was under control. At this moment, with a skeptical look, Yuki Junsan called back again. The person who answered the phone was none other than Audiobook. "Hello, Mr. Yuki Junshin. Is there anything else? The situation is under control." Hearing this, Yuki Junshin realized that the person who answered the phone didn't have the right accent. "I don't recognize your voice, I'm new here," Audiobook replied as he cooked. While cooking, Audiobook replied, "I was the one who called you just now." "So, the situation has been resolved?" "Yes, Mr. Yuki, it's been resolved." "Then why did Zhou Xiang, but your people were dealt with?" "My wife is waiting for me to cook. Don't bother me if there's nothing important." Audiobook smiled. "Oh, by the way, the people you sent are now locked up in Songhai First Prison. If you don't believe me, give them a call and ask yourself. They probably won't be out for espionage for more than 10 years. The call was cut off. Yuki Junshin hung up with an incredulous expression. Damn it. What on earth had Zhou Xiang done? Who's backing you up? Yuki Junshin was so angry that he was shaking. The feeling of being toyed with made him furious. He glared at Zhou Xiang with hatred in his eyes. Do you think that even if you manage to protect your son, I will not be able to protect him? Do you think you can leave Sun Island alive? What, Judao Pieces Dean's office is going to do something to me, a teacher of the people? Zhou Xiang got up with a teasing expression on his face. He dusted off his pants and walked straight out the door. If you want to do something to me, go ahead. But I advise teacher Yuki Junshan to stop as soon as possible. Don't ask for trouble. How can you live without Judao peace? Live? He. Tue. Zhou Xiang raised his eyebrows. His throat trembled as he spat on the floor of the dean's office. I've already sent my resignation letter to the dean's office and the headmaster's office. You make me sick. Just you wait, Zhou Xiang. I won't let you off easy. Yuki Junshan stamped his foot in exasperation. Dongfu City Football Stadium. This time, the closed-door competition for the ranking of high school students from 100 high schools on Sun Island would be held here. All the delegations had their own waiting rooms. Before the start of the competition, Wang Ming had reconfirmed Wang Ling's one-use talismans. He still had 66 functioning talismans, so he judged that it shouldn't be a problem for him to survive the competition. If you feel something's wrong, just run. Don't worry about anything else, got it? I'll use my brainwaves to erase the memories of everyone here, Wang Ming told Wang Ling. He realized that ever since Wang Ming and Zhai Yin had gotten together, this guy's brainwaves had become more and more versatile. But to be honest, after confirming their relationship, Wang Ming's brainwaves had indeed become a lot stronger. Wang Ling guessed that this was probably the result of a man in love who was constantly stimulated by his adrenal glands and male hormones. Coupled with his brainwaves during the day and at night, this idiot brother of his had become even stronger than before. Why do you look even more nervous than Ling Ling? Zhai Yin couldn't help laughing. They weren't in public now, so it was better for her to maintain her original appearance. The main reason was that her earlier disguise as Lotus Sun had been too unnatural, and could almost be said to be full of loopholes. So to be on the safe side, Zhai Yin and Lotus Sun had discussed that in private, Zhai Yin would still be herself to adjust her mentality. If it was Lotus Sun's turn to appear, Zhai Yin could use a magic treasure to complete her disguise in one click. Of course I'm nervous. The main thing is that I'm afraid Ling Ling won't know what to do. What if he accidentally uses 100 million points of power and erases Sun Island from the satellite map? Are you exaggerating? I can't, factor, I want you to recharge my batteries. Wang Ming took a deep breath, put his arm around Zhai Yin's waist, and rested his head on her chest. And this was the legendary brain wave man body Satoshi. On the side, Lotus Sun, who was disguised as Ryoko Kamiya, was envious. At that moment, Leek Sasaki pushed open the door and came in with the wild group Feng, Peacock and Hattori Chuanja, who had gone out to gather information. Everyone. Are you ready? Leek Sasaki said, we've just drawn lots and decided on the groups. There will be a total of 500 people from the 100 delegations participating in the competition this time. Half of them will be eliminated in the first round. According to the order, Lang Sang's match will start first. Their opponent is Kawada High School's Kanzuya Sakai. This surname sounds a little familiar. Lotus Sun frowned slightly. That's right. This Kanzuya Sakai is actually the younger brother of the sucker who was forced to give away that purple cherry blossom earlier. Leek Sasaki couldn't help laughing. The key is that Kanzuya Sakai also joined the Nine Paths and the Grey Sect branch in the afternoon, Wang Ling. Chapter 1565. Before the start of the tournament, Sakai Kanzuya had been conflicted about whether to join the Grey Church or not. His academic performance had always been very good, and he had never made any mistakes. He was a child who made his parents very worry-free. As the second child in the family, the young Kanzuya Sakai had always been doted on by the head of the Sakai family, Akira Sakai. He was a typical other people's child, growing up surrounded by all kinds of praises. However, just over 10 hours ago, everything seemed to have been broken by Huaguo Water Curtain Group's contract. His big brother Sakai Toyotani, who loved to cause trouble, suddenly received his father's praise and favor. This made Sakai Kanzuya upset from the beginning to the end. He knew Sakai Toyotani's intellect very well. With his brother's intellect, it was impossible for him to use that pot of purple cherry to win the attention of the young Miss of Wagwa Water Curtain Group. So the question was, who gave his big brother the idea? Sakai Kanzuya carefully analyzed the changes in his big brother and finally came to a conclusion. Everything was related to his big brother joining the Grey Church. It was clearly just a literary exchange organization, but it had such a great charm that it could cause a person's IQ to undergo a huge change. This forced Sakai Kanzuya to reevaluate the importance of the Grey Church. Since there were benefits to joining the Grey Church, he couldn't fall behind. Fortunately, his academic results were excellent. Just like that, Sakai Kanzuya joined the Nine Paths and the Grey Church's branch with outstanding results. But what Sakai didn't expect was that in today's match, the first person he drew was the legendary Ho Lang Sang. Now, the situation was very clear. Since as long as he followed the wishes of that young prodigal son, he would be able to win the favor of that young miss. He had to lose the next round. Not only did he have to lose, he had to lose beautifully. He lost so badly that no one would be able to tell that he was rigging the match. After this incident with Sakai Toyoto, Sakai Kazuo finally understood. The school's honor was *T. He had received so many awards that he could use them as wallpaper. In the end, it still couldn't compare to Sakai Toyoto's luck and the huge family benefits. Father. Watch carefully. Isn't it just being a bootlicker? I can do it too. Before going on stage, Kanzuya Sakai's mood was extremely complicated. But he was already prepared to lose to Wang Ling. As the saying goes, the certificate was valuable, but the honor was even more valuable. If he chose the path of a bootlicker, he could abandon both of them. Finally, it was time for the match between Wang Ling and Kanzuya Sakai. Due to the closed-door nature of the competition, the entire arena was prohibited from recording. No one could see what was happening inside. But Wang Ming could use his brain waves to remotely sense the images inside and project them into the minds of Lotus Sun, Jai In, Chive Sasaki and the others. Take it easy. Jai In was actually very worried about Wang Ming's condition. The main reason was that Wang Ming had been very excited these last few days, and he was worried that Wang Ming's brain would overheat from working too fast. In the end, Wang Ming's expression was a lot calmer than he had imagined. Don't worry about me, I feel like my brain has improved a lot recently. Wang Ming smiled. After all, now that he had a girlfriend, he would have a human seat beside him that could charge his brain waves for 5 minutes and talk for 2 hours. It was enough to make him feel refreshed. His first opponent was a member of the Grey sect. This was actually good news. As long as Sakai Kanzuya wasn't stupid, he wouldn't risk his life. It would actually be more advantageous for Wang Ling if he threw the match. Because it would save him a lot of one-off talismans and allow him to advance to the next round. But in Chive Sasaki's view, throwing the match was still technically difficult. Although it was a closed-door competition, the referee ball wasn't a fool. In regular matches, the referee ball had a built-in anti-match fixing function, which could determine whether two people were engaged in a fixed match based on the details of the fight, and thus carry out an intelligent assessment. If it was judged to be fixed, then both sides would be disqualified from the competition. In other words, if Sakai Kanzuya sincerely wanted to lose, he would have to trick the referee ball. Thus, Chive Sasaki was actually a little worried deep down. Brother Air, if this Sakai Kanzuya doesn't act well, I'm afraid Ho Lang Sang will be implicated. Don't worry, it won't be a problem. Wang Ming smiled as usual. In fact, Wang Ming had already studied the referee ball's method of determining whether a match was fixed. Before the start of each match, the referee ball would automatically measure the strength of both sides through the system, and then make a decision based on the results of the match as a whole. Generally speaking, if the side with the higher number at the start lost to the side with the lower number, there was a 70% chance that the match was fixed. Thus, the mechanism for determining whether a match was fixed was actually based on the initial number. Here, Wang Ling wanted to win and Sakai Kanzuya wanted to lose. And even with the multiple seals, Wang Ling's initial number was more than 1 trillion points higher than Sakai Kanzuya's. Thus, the basic judgment of a match being fixed wasn't valid from the start. He just needed to follow the normal procedure. At least, that was what Wang Ling thought when he officially met Sakai Kazuya. Wang Ling and Sakai Kazuya faced each other in a completely enclosed independent arena. Sakai Kazuya looked very nervous, and the sweat on his cheeks had been rolling down continuously since the start of the match, dripping to the ground without a break. In the 200 square meter room, there were 6 referee balls floating in the air, monitoring the match from all angles. 6 balls, Sakai Kazuya was well aware of this. If he wanted to fix the match, he would have to trick these 6 referee balls. BZZT. The 6 referee balls in the air gradually unfurled intertwining lines of spirit power. Wang Ling and Sakai Kazuya were well aware of this. The basic combat strength judgment was about to begin. This was the key to determining whether or not a match was fixed. Wang Ling looked at the air indifferently as he waited for the referee balls to make their judgment. On the other side, Sakai Kazuya looked a little flustered. He didn't know what Wang Ling's combat strength was. Thus, he didn't dare act rashly. Furthermore, his main worry was, if his combat strength was higher than Wang Ling's. If he lost the match, it was very likely that it would be judged as a match being fixed, and he would be eliminated along with this young man in front of him. He would think of the many rumors about Wang Ling as a mascot. Sakai Kazuya began to fear more and more that his initial value might really be higher than Wang Ling's. He absolutely couldn't let that happen. He was Sakai Kazuya. He had to carry the young man to the finals. And so, after making up his mind, before the judgment light hit him, Sakai Kazuya slapped himself hard on the forehead. Pooh! A large mouthful of blood gushed out of Sakai Kazuya's mouth like an exaggerated fountain. For Sakai Kazuya, this was a helpless move. Because he was worried that his initial value would be higher than Wang Ling's, he could only use this method to weaken himself by hurting himself. But Wang Ling felt this move. There was no need. Chapter 1566. In the first round, Wang Ling won effortlessly. The main reason was that Sakai Kazuya was too ruthless. She directly hit Tenko with her palm, and after causing damage, she held on until the start of the match. Wang Ling didn't even move. Sakai Kazuya bled from his 7 orifices and directly fell to the ground with a happy expression on his face. But this kind of self-mutilation to please Lotus Sun didn't suit her expectations. After Kazuya Sakai was carried away, Lotus Sun immediately split off Mysterious C's sword chi to chase after him and treat him. He's working so hard, Rong, aren't you going to help him? Wang Ming laughed in the independent mental chat space. If everyone used this method, then this shortcut would be too easy. Lotus Sun's expression was also very helpless. So to sum up. In the end, Kazuya Sakai paid the wrong price. In the office of the Kyushu and the dean's office, Yuki Kuen-san projected the footage of the closed-door competition into the office. This was a technique that used certain technical means to steal the image captured by the referee's ball into an image magic treasure and then project it. Wetsuji Junshan hoped that Wang Ling would lose, so naturally everyone was watching Wang Ling's fight. Sakai Kazuya from Kawada High School lost just like that. On the side, Holland from the foreign capital looked very ugly. He had seen Wang Ling's and Kazuya Alcohol's data on paper, and Kazuya Sakai's attributes were superior to Wang Ling's in all aspects. If even Sakai and Kazuya were to lose, then Holland couldn't think of any other possibility besides going easy on them. I didn't expect Sakai Kazuya to be so ruthless. The Grey Church really can't be underestimated. Yuki Kuniyama was also shocked by Kazuya Sakai's self-destructive move to weaken himself before the start of the match. What was it that made Sakai Kazuya go to this extent? Wamaki Jun-san and Holland were puzzled by this matter. Can you analyze Holang Sang's combat strength? Holland asked. I'm still thinking of a way. Wamaki Jun-san said. Stealing the ball from the referee is already a very dangerous operation. It will take some time to steal the combat power data. Mr. Holland. Who is this Holang Sang's next opponent? He's from Kawada High School. His name is Aki Yonakura. But don't worry, Mr. Holland, because I've arranged for this person. Yuki Jun-san laughed sinisterly. To deal with a hothead like that, it's not enough to defeat him in a match. Isn't this a little too boring? I want him to lose all standing and reputation. Akio Yonakura? I think I've heard this name before. This is the person on the list of Mishio elite students I provided to the Ministry of Foreign Investment. This student intends to further his studies in Mishio Nation. However, his family conditions are rather poor, so he doesn't have the qualifications to go. Yuki Jun-san said, so, I proposed to him the condition of a recommendation. They wanted him to lose the match on purpose. In that case, the referee would be able to determine that it was a rigged match and eliminate him and that Holang sang. I see. Holland nodded. But such a move would be a self-destructive move. Student Mikura's reputation will also be affected. Not at all. Yuki Jun-san shook his head and said, when he goes abroad to study, he'll have a new identity. I promise to give student Mikura Weiming clean data without any foundation so that he can start a new life. Thus, the record of a rigged match won't affect him at all. Hearing this, Holland heaved a long sigh of relief. The preparations this time did sound very thorough, without the slightest mistake or oversight. After all, this was how a rigged match was determined. If one side cheated, both sides would be eliminated together. As long as they were eliminated together, no matter which side had ulterior motives, they would be labeled as untrustworthy. Spectators often didn't care about the truth of the matter, it was fine as long as there was public opinion to guide them. Then, most people's habitual thinking would make them rush to the front like hungry wolves, bite down hard on their prey, and gorge themselves on it. Understanding the truth was too tiring, only happiness mattered. In some sense, Yuki Jun-san was indeed a very cunning opponent. He had a unique vision, and had pinpointed Wang Ling as the key to everything. As long as he could topple Wang Ling, whatever gray sect or reinforcements, they would all be defeated like a landslide. No matter what kind of achievements you had previously or how many people liked you, as long as you did one thing wrong, it would be magnified by public opinion. It wouldn't matter even if you were God. Because that was the reality. But what Holland and Yuki Jun-san didn't expect was, their seemingly flawless plan for a rigged match had a very important key. And that was, the referee's initial assessment of Wang Ling's fighting strength had to be lower than that Mikura Weiming, but they didn't know. This was a rigged match that could never be possible. Elsewhere, in Huaxiao Nation's Songhai City staff apartment. With Zhou Zi's help, Zhua elegantly prepared a table full of fragrant home-cooked dishes. As he ate, he switched the TV to a specific satellite channel. The TV was showing a live broadcast of Wang Ling's closed-door match. This image had been projected by Wang Ming's brainwaves to the Battle Sect satellite in space. A password was needed to access the channel. Thus, only a few core members of the Battle Sect knew how to get in. Isn't that classmate Wang Ling? Jumiya Ryoko frowned. The moment she saw Wang Ling, she suddenly felt that the youngster's face looked a little familiar. And she didn't know why. She suddenly felt that Zhua seemed to be paying special attention to Wang Ling himself. A woman's intuition told her that the relationship between Wang Ling and Zhua wasn't simply that of a senior and a junior. Although Lotus Sun had told her earlier that Wang Xiao, and Wang Ling were disciples that Zhua had secretly taken in, Jumiya Ryoko still felt that there was something wrong with the way Zhua looked at Wang Ling. What kind of Shifu looked at their disciples with admiration? And the way Zhua looked at him was the same way Zhou Zi was looking at him now, so, why on earth was it like this? Jumiya Ryoko started to feel a little confused. Classmate Wang Ling, is this a competition? Jumiya Ryoko asked curiously. Yes. Zhua nodded. As my disciple, of course I have to be concerned as his Shifu. After Zhua said this, Jumiya Ryoko fell silent again. She took a bite of the sweet and sour spare ribs, and for some reason, felt that they were particularly sour today. On the other side, when Zhou Zi heard that Wang Ling was Zhua's disciple, he also felt a little upset. It turned out that, Brother Zhuo already had a disciple. Ah, that was true. Wasn't it very normal for such an outstanding person like Brother Zhuo to have two disciples? Zhou Zi quickly adjusted his mentality, and his eyes quickly returned to normal as he stared fixedly at the image on the TV. He had wanted to study Wang Ling's charisma for Zhuo to take him in as a disciple. Just as he turned his gaze, the crisp sound of a slap rang out on the TV. Because at that very moment, classmate Mikura Wei Ming, who was in the second round of the competition with Wang Ling, was slapping himself for some reason. Chapter 1567. Huaguo Water Curtain Group. Jiang Xiaoche was working overtime again today, because it was almost time to get off work. Old Man Sun had summoned Jiang Xiaoche. There were all kinds of snacks and different flavors of popcorn on the old man's table, and he had even hired a dessert chef to make desserts on the spot. Jiang Xiaoche felt that this scene was a little familiar. He subconsciously glanced at the time, puzzled by Old Man Sun's behavior. This wasn't the time for the World Cup. It wasn't the time for League of Valor's S99 Global Finals. And it wasn't the time for Old Man Sun's favorite TV series or variety shows. Recently, the popular variety show, Big Brothers Who Stir Up Trouble, was Old Man Sun's favorite. Old Man Sun was a fashionable old man. In order to catch up with young people and gain a better understanding of their market, he never resisted learning about new things. But this scene in front of him wasn't common. Xiaoche, come and sit down. I was just worried that no one would watch the competition with me, Old Man Sun called out. Old Man Sun fiddled with the magic ball on the table, and a three-dimensional holographic image immediately appeared in the air. This is... Jiang Xiaoche looked at this scene hesitantly. Because the scene in front of him instantly made him notice a familiar person. It was that pretty boy called Wang Ling. This is the live broadcast of classmate Wang Ling's exchange student competition on Sun Island, Old Man Sun said. Jiang Xiaoche was a little confused. But I remember that classmate Wang Ling participated in a closed-door competition. Because of his connection with Sun Island's business, Jiang Xiaoche actually had a certain level of understanding of Sun Island. It was Lotus Sun who had found him and asked him to sign the 2 billion yuan deal with Sakai Toyonian's family. So this old man also paid a certain price, Old Man Sun said. Price? Isn't the organizer the Sun Island Alliance of 10,000 schools? This old man agreed to be the title sponsor for their follow-up large-scale competition, which was how I managed to get this video. Hearing this, Jiang Xiaoche's heart inexplicably ached a little. But master, I still don't know why you called me here. No buts. Chatting with me is part of your duty as Secretary General. Master, I have to be with my girlfriend today, don't give me that. You still want to pretend that you have a girlfriend in front of me? You might have many female companions, but even now, you are still a lonely old man. Don't think I don't know. These words were like a whip that deeply lashed at Jiang Xiaoche's heart, causing him to be immediately stunned on the spot. Old Man Sun said, sit down. I'm looking for you this time because I want to watch the game with you and then have a casual chat. I think you've always misunderstood student Wang Ling. Hearing this, Jiang Xiaoche was instantly stunned. He thought that no one would know what he had done. However, he never thought that he could not escape the old man's eyes in the end. Old Man Sun in front of him was the one who hid the most. Have a seat, little Che. Old Man Sun smiled kindly. All right, the amiable light in those eyes was like a spring breeze caressing one's face. Jiang Xiaoche could not refuse, and at the same time, he felt ashamed. He didn't dare to look Old Man Sun in the eye. He could only sit by the side. As he watched, Jiang Xiaoche realized that this match seemed a little different from what he had imagined. Why did that Sun Island native student keep slapping his own face? Meanwhile, the battle between Wang Ling and Mikura Weimei was still going on. To be honest, Mikura Weimei had been against the idea of a rigged match at first. But the conditions that Yuki Kuniyama had offered him were too good. It had always been his dream to study abroad. His grades at Kawada High School were excellent, and he had received a lot of scholarships every year. But it was unrealistic to rely on these meager scholarships to study abroad. The most important thing was that the school could only recommend a few students to study abroad each year. You could count them on your fingers. It was said that the students with the best grades would be selected. But in practice, these places were destined to be reserved for those who had the connections. Mikuro Uemei had no background or power, and secondly, he had no money. It would be a fool's dream for him to get a recommendation. Thus, Mikuro Uemei had already made plans the next day. He clearly knew that a rigged match was in fact a very shameful thing to do, but he was still willing to do it. Because right now, he was nothing. The only thing he could do was endure for the time being and become someone else's pawn. As long as he could get through this and officially breathe the air of freedom in Mishio Nation, everything would be worth it. What he had to do was to endure it silently. A rigged match had to be rigged. Watching Mikuro Uemei slap himself again and again, Wang Ling's thoughts were inexplicably complicated. The Wang family, for example, were actually just ordinary commoners. But under the influence of father and mother Wang's education since young, Wang Ling knew better than anyone else how to be content with what he had. Wang Ling had never thought about studying abroad. Because the moon was the same everywhere in the world, even if he went abroad, the moon might not necessarily be rounder. But just because he thought this way didn't mean that other people thought the same. Mikuro Uemei wanted to rise and obtain better resources, and use his own efforts to give his family a better life. There was nothing wrong with this in itself. Why is that person hitting himself? In front of the TV, Zhou Zi was puzzled. He probably made an agreement with someone to drag my disciple down with him through a rigged match. Audra picked up a pepper and salt pork chop and put it in Jamiya Ryoko's bowl. This scene lifted Jamiya Ryoko's mood a little, but then she saw Audra pick up another chop and put it in Zhou Zi's bowl. Jamiya Ryoko, the way Sun Island judges a rigged match is very simple. First, it's based on basic combat strength, and second, it's based on overall combat strength. As long as the side with the higher combat strength is suspected of going easy, it's very easy to judge it as a rigged match. Then, both sides will be disqualified. Then isn't classmate Wang Ling in danger? Zhou Zi stared fixedly at the screen. To be honest, if he had been in this situation, he definitely wouldn't have known what to do. He wanted to see how Wang Ling would deal with it. Wang Ling watched as Mikuro Uemei slapped himself again and again, leaving crisscrossed handprints on his originally thin little face. He was as heavy-handed as Kanzuya Sakai from before. These slaps on the face were in fact infused with inner strength. Mikuro Uemei was deliberately giving himself internal injuries. But Wang Ling could see that. Mikuro Uemei didn't want to do that. As he slapped himself, he couldn't stop the tears from rolling down his cheeks. They were silent tears. It wasn't because of the pain. The moment he faced Mikuro Uemei, Wang Ling had already known everything. Yuki Kaneyama's request for Mikuro Uemei was for him to injure him as much as possible, then fall to the ground and play dead, to deliberately let Wang Ling win, and thus judge it as a rigged match. That was to say, there were many ways to judge a rigged match. But Mikuro Uemei had chosen one. A way that wouldn't hurt anyone. Because the final result would be the same, he just needed to achieve his goal of rigging the match. Although he knew that choosing to study abroad in this way was extremely unfair to Wang Ling. Even if he didn't hurt Wang Ling, he would still have a bad reputation for rigging the match. Mikuro Uemei couldn't think of any way to make up for it, thus, he could only use this method. After so many years, he had endured it all. Powerless and powerless, he had drifted with the tide on this small cultivation island just so that his family could live a better life. At the same time, he slapped himself. Shame, resistance, and the intense loneliness of struggling alone suddenly welled up in his heart. Tears fell uncontrollably from Mikuro Uemei's eyes. At that moment, he saw Wang Ling slowly approach him with his hands in his trouser pockets. "No, don't come near me. Long San." Mikuro Uemei's face was already so swollen that he couldn't speak. He was roaring in his heart. He thought that no one could understand his helplessness and loneliness. But the truth was that when Wang Ling gradually approached him and looked him in the eye, Wang Ling's expression changed. In a split second, Mikuro Uemei suddenly felt his mind go blank, and he actually fell into a trance. What is this? At that moment, an empty universe appeared in Mikuro Uemei's mind. In the boundless universe, there wasn't even a single star. He saw the lonely figure of the King Ling. Mikuro Uemei's heart was instantly moved. He couldn't imagine the scene in his mind. He had thought that he was already the loneliest person in the world. But he had never expected that the loneliness in the heart of the youngster standing in front of him would be far greater than his. That feeling of helplessness, desolation, and solitude crept over him like a crawling worm, and Mikuro Uemei's mind instantly went blank. Bystanders couldn't tell what was happening at all. Mikuro Uemei's body went limp and he fell forward. Wang Ling carefully caught his body and slowly laid him flat on the ground. That move just now was called the Great Loneliness Spell. It was also one of the gentler spells among Wang Ling's current Heavenly Dao spells. There weren't any side effects. The victim would feel 1/1,000,000th of Wang Ling's loneliness, and would gradually stop thinking under the impact of this loneliness. Thus, Mikuro Uemei closed his eyes just like that, as expected. Wang Ling stared at the youngster on the ground without the slightest ripple of emotion on his face. Before he left, he cast a spirit light on Mikuro Uemei's face. The swollen face that Mikuro Uemei had slapped almost deformed instantly returned to normal. Chapter 1568. When Mikuro woke up, he realized that he was in the infirmary. He took out his phone and looked at his face in the reflection on the screen. His face, which should have been swollen from being slapped, had completely recovered. There was no pain, no internal injuries, as if he hadn't participated in the competition at all. He already couldn't remember how he had collapsed. It was just at the moment his eyes met Wang Ling's, a huge emptiness and loneliness assaulted his mind, causing his thoughts to stagnate. Then, Mikuro closed his eyes. This duel was like a dream. "Student, you're awake?" The old auntie in the infirmary looked at Mikuro. "Doctor, my injuries. You fainted during the competition, and you were sent here without any external injuries. But we can't determine your internal injuries for the time being. How are you feeling? Do you feel uncomfortable anywhere?" "No," Mikuro was astonished. He was already uninjured when he was sent here. Logically speaking, given how hard Wang Ling had hit him, it was impossible for him to recover so quickly. So, did Ho-Lang-san do something? Mikuro was puzzled. "Student, if you're not feeling unwell, please give up your bed. There are still students waiting in line for treatment." "How far has the competition progressed?" Mikuro was even more puzzled. "There are currently 125 people, and 25 people will be selected for the Arena Master Battle." "The Arena Master Battle has already begun?" "That's right. It said that the winner will be decided through a contest of mental strength. The student who fought with you earlier is one of the 25 Arena Masters," the doctor said. Mikuro understood. He had heard of this Arena Master Battle before. The 25 Arena Masters were the defenders. As long as they could defend against 5 random people's mental attacks, they would directly advance to the next round. As for the attackers, as long as they succeeded in their attack, they would become the new Arena Master. After becoming the new Arena Master, they would have to continue defending against 4 people's attacks to advance to the next round. According to the rules of this closed-door competition, only 50 people could advance to the next round. That was to say, the first 50 people to advance would advance to the next round. "How is Ho-Lang-san? Closed-door competition, how would I know?" The doctor sighed. As he spoke, he pointed to the door with his eyes. Wei Akira was taken aback for a moment before he got off the bed and walked towards the infirmary. As soon as he stepped out of the door, he was shocked by the scene in front of him, because it was in the corridor in front of the infirmary. Those who had fainted were lying on the ground like sardines. What is this? Like a piece of wood, Mikuro Uemei was rooted to the spot by the scene in front of him. About 90% of the people lying on the ground had been sent by Wang Ling. Because of everyone who faced Wang Ling. Finally, they all closed their eyes. He successfully advanced to the first 10% of the group stage. Wang Ling's fluctuating heart was finally mostly at ease. He didn't expect that the winner of the Arena Lord round would be decided by a battle of mentality. Conversely, this was what he was better at. Compared with physical contact, mental damage was actually less harmful. Coupled with the restriction of the one-time use talisman on him, he could almost ignore the damage caused by the mental battle. For example, in the Arena Lord round, Wang Ling only needed to sit upright and calculate functions in his mind. Whoever dared to invade his mental space would immediately be entangled by countless parabolas, and die on the spot, according to the memories of the people who had woken up after the fight with Wang Ling. Because the calculations in their brains had been too complicated, they already couldn't remember exactly what had happened. They just felt like their minds had been enveloped by a sea of parabolas and mathematical symbols. After waking up, they actually didn't feel the slightest bit distressed about their failure. Instead, they felt very guilty for not learning math well. As a result, some rumors began to spread in the stadium. Holang San, a magical man. He's actually calculating math problems during the entire competition. Holang San is really a very gentle man. I heard that when student Wei Akira was injured, it was also Holang San who healed him. He actually healed his opponent. No wonder so many people joined the Grey sect. I get it. He's a magical man. So are the 9 paths and Grey sect branches still recruiting? I'm pretty good at Chinese and math. Wang Ling, in the infinite Milky Way, the monk had originally been playing Gamoku with Dusk. Before the first game was over, the monk had already turned to his character and projected an image of Wang Ling's match on Earth into the air. Savage couldn't wait for the monk to leave after this game. But when he saw that the image in the air was of Wang Ling's match, he deliberately slowed down a lot. He pretended to be thinking seriously about the game and looked like he didn't care at all, but in fact, he was quietly watching Wang Ling's every move out of the corner of his eye. TSK, you really aren't frank. The monk couldn't help laughing. If you want to watch, just watch openly. This poor monk has plenty of time. Savage frowned. Monk, you should know who he is, right? Don't talk nonsense. This poor monk doesn't know. Monk Jin Dang fiddled with the Buddha beads in his hand, his eyes narrowed into slits, his expression extremely mysterious. You already have the answer in your heart, don't you? Dusk was silent for a while, but only said 3 words, mysterious thing. The monk laughed. Whimsical idea. Savage let out a long sigh. But apart from this, I really can't think of where this power came from. Tianming is still locked up there, so it can't be him. Monk Jin Dang shook his head and said, I once thought of many possibilities, but in the end, I rejected them all. Do you see this poor monk's pair of characters? Back then, in order to test his identity, I only got a glimpse of his silhouette, but this poor monk's character was already blind. There's actually such a thing. When Dusk and Peng Shiren next to him heard this, they were utterly stunned. They had never heard the monk mention this before. That's too much, monk. Although Dusk had just suffered a setback at Wang Ling's hands, he still didn't believe that Wang Ling could be that powerful. He felt that the monk's remarks were a little exaggerated. If you don't believe me, you can try. The monk smiled. Now, you can enter Ling Jinren's head and take a look. Try invading it with your mental energy and you'll know. What are you plotting? Dusk's expression was a little alert. I'm just responding to your doubts. Isn't the truth the more practical? If you're afraid, this poor monk will understand. After all, this poor monk is also afraid. The monk smiled. It's just a try. I'll give it a try. Dusk snorted. A few seconds later, Dusk closed his eyes and stopped thinking for a while. Chapter 1569. The monk hadn't expected Dusk to fall to the ground at all. To compete with Ling Jinren in terms of functions, and to go so deep, if you didn't close your eyes, who would? Having experienced it firsthand, the monk was well aware of how terrifying this ability was. This time, Dusk had miscalculated. Monk Golden Lamp counted the time on his fingers. It would probably be a long time before Dusk woke up. However, the other party was too hostile to him, and kept trying to drive him away. After thinking it over, the monk felt that having Dusk close his eyes for the time being was the safest option. There were still many things in the universe that Dusk had to deal with, and now wasn't the time for him to throw away his life in vain. Monk, you're deliberately letting him. Peng Shiren wasn't stupid, and could more or less see through the monk's intentions. But he still couldn't figure out why the monk was doing this. You've caused trouble, the monk said as he looked at him. Caused trouble? Hearing this, Peng Shiren couldn't help looking puzzled. Then, he laughed bitterly, and there was vigilance in his eyes. I'm just a soul now. What else do you want, monk? Monk Golden Lamp only felt sorry for Peng Shiren's obstinacy. But he always believed that Tao ancestor Wang must have had an ulterior motive for choosing Peng Shiren as a true disciple back then. No matter what happened next, it was still necessary for Peng Shiren to exist. This was the best-case scenario that the monk had calculated so far. You still don't understand the seriousness of the problem. The monk stared at Peng Shiren and said, you also underestimate how terrifying that evil god is. Tao ancestor went through so much trouble to seal him back then, and it was reasonable. If you let him out, the universe will definitely be thrown into chaos. As long as the heavenly tomb is in my hands, what can he do? He's just a shark with its teeth pulled out. Peng Shiren finished speaking. The monk just looked at him quietly without saying a word. After a moment of silence, Peng Shiren's expression suddenly changed drastically, and he slumped to the ground. It seems you've finally figured it out, the monk said. Peng Shiren looked flustered, and his cheeks started to drip with sweat. He had figured it out. His physical body, it was still in the star-devouring space. Although he had been hiding the location of the heavenly tomb, if the heretic god used his body, even if he didn't say anything, he could still find the heavenly tomb. Although that person's strength was not as great as before, he still had that kind of ability. Peng Shiren was very clear about this. However, Peng Shiren still couldn't believe that he had been deceived by the grave goddess. I have a soul contract with him. It's impossible for him to betray me. Peng Shiren exclaimed. Tyrant put his palms together and sighed. Do you know why Tao ancestor couldn't kill him completely and chose to separate him into two and seal him separately? Peng Shiren was stunned. Because this was something he had never thought about. With his master's personality, if he had a way to completely destroy such an evil god, he would definitely not use a roundabout method like sealing him. The evil beings in this world could only be completely eliminated in order to avoid future troubles. But Monk Golden Lamp knew the truth. However, there was no point in talking about these things now. The location of the heavenly tomb had been found by the grave god, which meant that the grave god was about to fuse with the other half of the heavenly tomb. It's time for this poor monk to set off. At that moment, the monk said. Monk. I'll go with you. Peng Shiren also stood up. Stay in this astrolabe and wait for Denglong to wake up. With your current strength, you'll just die in vain if you go. You might even become the grave god's food, the monk said. But can you win if you go? Peng Shiren frowned. This poor monk can still delay it for a while. Monk Golden Lamp's expression looked fearless. He condensed an extremely thin thread from his spiritual power and penetrated Peng Shiren's soul, binding him firmly and chaining him together. Although the astrolabe also had restrictions set up by Denglong that could completely prevent Peng Shiren from escaping, Monk Golden Lamp still felt that it was safer this way. However, Jean Deng still felt that this double insurance would be safer. Monk. What are you doing? Peng Shiren tried to struggle. However, the monk had already made up his mind. His attitude was so firm that Peng Shiren couldn't imagine it. Say no more. If you dare to say another word, this poor monk will tie you up with the turtle shell bind. As expected, Peng Shiren obediently shut up. The monk predicted that with Peng Shiren's personality, he would definitely not be able to accept such a shameful position. After doing all this, Monk Golden Lamp felt that it was about time. He used distance shrinking to inches to leave this vast astrolabe where Danglong lived. Buddha said, "If I don't go to hell, who will?" The Golden Lamp monk knew very well that his battle with the grave divinity wouldn't last long. This battle was destined to be one where he would jump back and forth on the edge of hell. But in fact, the monk didn't think he needed to hold on for too long. He just had to wait until Ling Junren's match was over. Who cared if he went to hell or not? That grave god would definitely die. In Jiudaohe's exclusive waiting room for contestants, Wang Ling returned victorious. Next to him was a stack full of baby magazines. A prize of 1 million Sun Island dollars was a lot of money for Wang Ling. Participating in a competition was originally forbidden in the old Wang family, especially when it came with a prize. But it was a closed-door meeting this time, so it wasn't a big problem. Of course, the most important thing was that Wang Ling had used his own ability to win the competition. Thus, with Wang Ming's help, he had worked very hard to compress his battle strength to the same level as his peers. At least in terms of aura. It was the same, but to be honest, despite all the preparations he had made, Wang Ling actually didn't feel like he was participating. Because most of the people present were Grey Church disciples. As soon as they saw that he was their opponent, they would think of ways to torture themselves, and at the slightest disagreement, they would start thinking about fixing the match. And just like that, Wang Ling had directly entered the final hurdle. As for the battle of defending the arena, which was a competition of spirit, Wang Ling didn't think he had used his own ability. That person had fainted at the sight of the function in his head. Could he be blamed? It could only be said that it was a result of his lack of skill. Although Wang Ling now also felt that he had gone a little overboard. The competition clearly hadn't ended yet. But he was already thinking about how to spend the 1 million Sun Island dollars to buy Unwan a present. But for Wang Ling, this money was indeed like he had picked it up for free. There was no longer much suspense. Before Mother Wang had become pregnant with Unwan, Wang Ling had actually been a little resistant in his heart. He didn't know whether Unwan's birth would be another kind of disaster for the earth and the universe, but as the day of hatching approached, regarding the new member of the old Wang family, Wang Ling suddenly felt a different kind of emotion in his heart. Until the moment when he had come to Sun Island and decided to participate in the competition to buy Wang Wan a present, Wang Ling finally had a deeper realization. His attitude toward his upcoming little sister. He couldn't say what it was. But the joy he felt was the same as when he had seen the limited edition crispy noodle snacks. But now, for Wang Ling, there was a new problem. Now that he had 1 million Sun Island dollars, what should he buy for his sister? He didn't know what this little girl, did she like crispy noodle snacks? If she didn't, should he groom her? Chapter 1570. When Dusk woke up, he found that he and Peng Shiren were entangled by a powerful spirit thread. "Brother Zhang. You're finally awake." Peng Shiren cried out with a frightened expression on his face. He felt his sea of consciousness explode, as if something was burning in his lungs, and a huge vortex had appeared in the center of his sea of consciousness. It was completely sunken in, and there wasn't even a drop of seawater inside. Dusk sensed that something was wrong, and was stunned to find that his memories had actually been tampered with. He placed his claw gently on Peng Shiren's head next to him, and found the same problem. A small part of their memories had actually been quietly tampered with in the astrolabe. It was already very clear who the instigator of this matter was. Did the monk do this? Dusk frowned deeply, and his emotions became complicated. Before the game of Gamoku was over, the monk had already disappeared. The direction of the incident was very clear. Dusk picked up a chess piece and broke it open, and a trace of Buddha fire of the past flowed out of it. Looking at this scene, Dusk instantly knew how Monk Golden Lamp had done all this. A chess piece of the past, it turned out that the monk had already started to set this up as early as the game. Dusk frowned deeply. He didn't understand why the monk had done this. Back then, Dao ancestor Wang had chosen Peng Shiren as his true disciple. Logically speaking, the monk shouldn't have had a good impression of Peng Shiren. But now, he had set up this trap, and used the Buddha fire of the past hidden in the chess piece to conceal the fact that Peng Shiren had discovered the heavenly tomb during the game. Now, Dusk completely understood. The monk had done all this on purpose. He had deliberately let Peng Shiren spy on his mind, and then faint from the mental backlash. He had also deliberately played a game of chess with Dusk, so that both Dusk and Peng Shiren would fall for it. Monk, you think I didn't notice? You underestimate me too much. Dusk smiled bitterly. He closed his eyes and pinched his fingers together to calculate, and the expression on his face turned complicated. He couldn't help glaring at Peng Shiren. Why didn't you wake me up earlier? Peng Shiren hung his head, looking very much like a child who had made a mistake. Peng Shiren roughly understood the current situation. The monk used the Buddha fire of the past to temporarily conceal the fact that the heavenly tomb had already been opened. After the monk left, Peng Shiren repeatedly pondered the words the monk said to him before he left. His body and soul began to fear the god of the grave. Forget it. I can't blame you. Who would have thought that a monk would be so scheming? Bai stared at Peng Shiren and sighed. This monk is trying to get rid of us and fight the grave god himself. This was suicide. I have to help him. Just as he was about to get up, Peng Shiren suddenly screamed, "Don't move, Brother Zhang." There was a look of agony on his face. Peng Shiren felt a special pain because the spirit threads that were entwined around their bodies were pulled. This monk, how dare he, only now did Bai sense the abnormality of the spirit thread. This was not an ordinary spirit thread, but a Buddha's salvation thread that could trace back to the soul. If the spirit thread was pulled or pulled away, Peng Shiren's soul would immediately be sent to reincarnation. Protecting Peng Shiren was the mission that Tao ancestor Wang gave him. The monk knew that Peng Shiren would not take the risk to pull the thread, so he disregarded Peng Shiren and forcefully left the astrolabe to fight for him. What is this monk trying to do? Bai was furious and flipped the chessboard. The Buddha's salvation thread could not be forcefully removed. Now, he could only wait for the Buddha's salvation thread to disappear automatically. There were two conditions for it to disappear automatically. First, the monk's spiritual power had already been exhausted, and he could not maintain the Buddha's salvation thread's power. Second, the monk had already died in battle. This was the worst situation. Previously, Bai wanted to chase the monk away because he wanted to find an opportunity to reach the heavenly tomb. He even thought of how to keep the monk in his astrolabe. He did not expect the monk to make a move before him. Brother Zhang, what should we do now? Peng Shiren knew that a disaster was imminent, and he did not know what to do. Bai sat cross-legged and lowered his head in deep thought. What to do? He did not know what to do either. The only thing he could do now was to sit cross-legged and chant Amitabha. On the other side, the monk was also searching for the heavenly tomb after trapping Bai and Peng Shiren in the astrolabe. He extracted Peng Shiren's concealed memory and fused it into his sea of consciousness. Then, he found the location of the heavenly tomb. There was a smell of gunpowder in this cosmic space that wasn't tainted by the slightest bit of stars. The monk could indeed feel that there was an intense battle here. Is it a hidden entrance? The monk frowned slightly. The monk did not expect that Tao ancestor Wang would hide the heavenly tomb here. If he did not extract Peng Shiren's memory, he would never be able to find the exact location of the heavenly tomb in the vast Milky Way. The monk opened the swastika talisman and used the power of the past Buddha's fire to enhance his vision to observe what had happened before he arrived here. In the end, he saw the old woman whose soul was ignited and who died in pain while screaming, "Run, run quickly." The old woman screamed at the top of her lungs. As her soul burned, she finally turned into nothingness. The monk put his palms together and chanted the rebirth mantra in his heart to perform the ritual for the poor heavenly tomb keeper. The grave god was just as cruel as he had imagined. He knew that the old woman's soul had been burned and could not enter the reincarnation ritual. His current ritual might not be of any use. However, the monk still wanted to do it. Monks were compassionate and sought psychological comfort. "Monk, are you the only one here?" A few seconds later, a familiar figure appeared in front of the monk. It was the grave god's voice, but the body was not his original body. You stole Shiren's physical body? The monk looked at the person in front of him and was slightly stunned. The person in front of him had the handsome face of Peng Shiren, but the color of his eyes and hair had changed. Purple eyes, purple hair. Everything was a color that was filled with evil. There was also a small horn on his forehead. If I didn't want to break the soul contract with him, I wouldn't have to do this. However, fusing with his body gave me an unexpected benefit. I can do whatever I want in the heavenly tomb. The Tao ancestor can't bear to hurt his precious disciple. The grave god sneered. He released his aura slightly, and the monk immediately felt a strong wind in front of him. The kasaya on his body fluttered wildly in the wind, and a huge oppressive force brought with it a feeling of crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. He's so strong. The monk was shocked. He felt like he was a tree branch swaying in the wind. The grave god at his peak was too terrifying. Evil purple light surged around his body, and his aura kept rising. He was like the king of the universe looking down on the mortal world. Chaotic energy rushed into the sky and engulfed half of the infinite Milky Way. This kind of power was beyond the monk's imagination. Monk. Are you here to transcend yourself? Before the monk could react, the grave god moved and appeared behind Golden Lamp in an instant. He opened his hand and grabbed Golden Lamp's bald head. Amitba. The monk closed his eyes as the grave god grabbed his smooth head. There was no sadness or joy on his face. You're not dodging. Are you trying to prove that you're stubborn? The grave god snorted. Then, with a huge boom, his palm exploded, and the shockwave of the explosion spread endlessly. Black spatial cracks formed under the impact of the chaotic energy. The distance between them was measured in light years, and it continued to expand beyond the infinite Milky Way. No one would have thought that this terrifying scene, which was like the beginning of the universe, was created just to crush a monk's head. Chapter 1571. The monk's head contained the power of the heavenly tribulation. The moment the grave god crushed his head, the brain inside boiled and was released along with the power of the heavenly tribulation that had been suppressed for a long time. The monk had deliberately let the grave god crush his head, hoping to kill the grave god by self-detonating, but this idea was too naive. Even after such a big explosion, the grave god still stood tall in the universe. His body was wrapped in an ancient and mysterious mark. It was taken from the heavenly tomb. After taking over Peng Shiren's body, he had obtained benefits that the world couldn't understand. Among them was the ancient Taoist seal on his body. The grave god remembered that it was an ability that Tao ancestor Wang had displayed when he fought against him. At first, he thought it was a spell, but in fact, the ancient Taoist seal was also a chaotic object. They had spiritual intelligence. Once the grave god obtained the inheritance rights, they would wrap around his body like reptiles, making the grave god look majestic. Standing face to face with the grave god, Monk Jin Deng could even feel that he wasn't fighting a living being, but half of the universe. Monk, you're not dead yet. Come. Fight again. I've obtained countless divine items from the heavenly tomb, and I can show them to you one by one. The grave god laughed arrogantly. He didn't take the monk seriously at all. In his eyes, Monk Jin Deng was just a tool to test the new Dharma treasure in his hand. As soon as he finished speaking, a ball of Buddha fire appeared about 100 feet in front of the grave god and gradually condensed into the monk's figure. Your aura has increased. The grave god had a playful look on his face when he saw the monk who had just appeared. After being tempered by the Buddha fire, the monk was reborn from the fire. The kasaya on his upper body was peeled off and turned into flower-like fragments that lingered around him. At this moment, his upper body was emitting a golden Buddha light, and a powerful aura of Buddhism accompanied the 3 balls of Buddha fire of the past, present, and future, opposing the grave god. Golden body mode. This was an ability that the monk had never used before. Because this was a technique that burned one's reincarnation realm cultivation as the price, it couldn't be used easily. The aura of an earth ancestor. No, not yet. Just a little bit more. The grave god sensed the power that monk Jin Dang exuded. As he spoke, a jade Buddha head appeared in his palm. This was another divine item that the grave god had discovered in the heavenly tomb. Monk, you are a paragon of Buddhism. Do you know what this is? The grave goddess sneered. The monk's golden eyes moved slightly. Following that, a powerful energy burst out from his body. The immovable golden body actually cracked at the sight of the jade Buddha head. Monk, you're still too young. He was sure that the monk would react when he presented the jade Buddha head, but he didn't expect that the monk would break his golden immovable body for such a Buddha head. Even the most holy of Buddhism was nothing more than this. As a matter of fact, this jade Buddha head belonged to none other than the Golden Lamp monk's teacher, who had passed away in meditation. This person was also a friend of Tao ancestor Wang. After the monk died, Tao ancestor Wang refined the monk's skull into this jade Buddha head and buried it together in this heavenly tomb. The grave divinity was knowledgeable. After identifying the origin of this jade Buddha head, he concluded that it was monk Jin Dang's life gate. He never thought that the effect would be surprisingly good when he presented it at this moment. The next moment, there was a tremendous explosion in the universe. Monk Jin Dang forced his cracked immovable golden body to release endless Buddhist light, and for a moment, the endless sound of the great Tao resounded throughout the universe. The sound wave spread out, reaching countless light years away. Even the grave god was excited. He had been suppressed by Tao ancestor Wang for too long, and hadn't experienced a hearty battle for too long. He didn't care about the monk in front of him at all. But he also enjoyed the monk's torment, the pained expression on his face, the way he struggled and then roared, just like the tomb keeper of the heavenly tomb. In the end, everything was just dust in the universe. At the same time, thunder rained down on earth in Songhai City at that moment. Large swathes of dark clouds covered the sky, as if they were going to collapse. Father Wang could already see countless lightning bolts striking the ground through the window near the Wang family's small villa in particular, creating craters in the ground. A lot of big trees in the distance were directly split in half. Loopy Toad had been resting in the courtyard, but when it saw this scene, it shrank its neck and slipped into the villa. This lightning was too unusual. Loopy Toad instinctively sensed that this seemed to be a butterfly effect caused by something unusual in the universe. This wasn't natural lightning, nor was it heavenly punishment lightning. Although it was very faint, Loopy Toad could clearly sense that there seemed to be an almost imperceptible aura of primal chaos in this lightning. This was because when it had been promoted to a divine beast, it had personally experienced the pain of being surrounded by lightning mixed with the power of primal chaos. If it hadn't been for Lotus Sun at that time, it would have died. Fortunately, the Wang family's small villa had been enlightened by Wang Ling. There were also countless other enlightened gremlins inside, so the primal chaos lightning wouldn't affect it for the time being. But Loopy Toad still had a vague sense of foreboding. Child's father, Mother Wang, had been preparing dinner, but at that moment, she suddenly lost her balance and almost fell over. Loopy Toad hurriedly darted over and transformed into its human form to support her. In the end, Loopy Toad felt that Mother Wang had almost crushed it to death. Because Mother Wang was astonishingly heavy, it was far more than Loopy Toad had imagined. Could it be the weight of little girl Nguan in her belly? Mother, how is it? When Father Wang heard the news and rushed over, he sucked in a cold breath when he saw Loopy Toad under Mother Wang. The main thing was that this was Father Wang's first time seeing Loopy Toad in human form, and most importantly, it wasn't wearing anything. Lying under Mother Wang's body like that was indeed a little vulgar, but he didn't blame Loopy Toad, and instead felt a little grateful to this family dog. Luckily, Loopy Toad had been there just now. Father Wang went over and propped Mother Wang up. Loopy Toad heaved a huge sigh of relief when he saw Mother Wang's strong arms. How can you be so relaxed? Loopy Toad changed back into its dog form, its face full of shock. Before Ling Ling left the country, he specially enlightened my arms. Now I also have a Qilin arm, Father Wang said with a smile. Loopy Toad, Father Wang checked Mother Wang's condition. Then, he frowned. She can't, her water broke. Nguan is going to give birth. She's going to give birth? Loopy Toad was shocked. Although it was almost 10 days ahead of the predicted time of childbirth, this little girl was in a hurry to break out of her shell, so there was nothing they could do about it. They had previous experience dealing with Wang Ling's birth. This time, Father Wang's preparations could be said to be exceptionally thorough. Old Wang family. Level 1 red alert. All gremlins, act according to plan. Father Wang hugged Mother Wang tightly and started to assign tasks to everyone in the Wang family's small villa. Also, quickly ask Lord Ma to invite Immortal Toya here. As soon as he said that, the fridge in the kitchen shook slightly. Cold air was released from it, and the fridge door slowly opened in front of everyone. Loopy Toad was alarmed. This was because, after being enchanted, there was actually an operating theater hidden inside the refrigerator. Sterile operating room, ready. The enlightened fridge gave off an emotionless electronic voice. She was really going to give birth. At that moment, Loopy Toad's heart was in turmoil. It also thought of something that might happen. It knew that the monk was now fighting with that grave god. And little girl Nwan had actually chosen to break out of her shell at this time. Loopy Toad felt that this wasn't a coincidence. Could it be that this girl was thinking of killing the grave god? Loopy Toad was horrified. F***K. No way. No way, she had just been born. Chapter 1572. Loopy Toad was greatly shocked to be born a full 10 days ahead of its due date. Loopy Toad had already seen how strong this little girl Nwan was when she was still an embryo in her mother's womb. He was able to hang Dao ancestor Wang's subordinate groundhog up and beat it up. If he was officially born, his strength would naturally be heaven-defying. But the grave goddess was no ordinary person. Could he really beat him? In the body of an infant? Are you sure you don't need a few more years to develop? Loopy Toad pondered. It gazed at the scene of lightning bolts dancing like silver snakes outside the window, and suddenly had a deeper understanding of the birth of this strange phenomenon. Now, this was a lightning anomaly on Earth. Obviously, it was all caused by Anwan alone. Dark clouds loomed overhead and thunder boomed. It was as if doomsday had arrived. A lot of cultivators on Earth raised their heads one after another and maintained the same posture as Loopy Toad, looking up at the sky at a 45-degree angle. But the difference was, apart from Loopy Toad, the other cultivators on Earth didn't know what was behind this lightning anomaly. Many people thought that a mighty figure was transcending the tribulation. In reality, a devil's child was about to descend into the world. In the Wang family's small villa, the group of spiritual monsters had gone through countless drills to maintain an orderly order. In the end, Mother Wang was sent to a sterile operating room that had been prepared in advance in a semi-conscious state. Immortal Toya also arrived very quickly. Lord Ma sent him along with his 2 disciples, Jin Shi and Yin Shi. The immortals are finally here. Invite him in. Father Wang was anxiously pacing back and forth in front of the fridge. When he saw Immortal Toya appear with Jin Shi and Yin Shi, he hurried forward to greet them. Immortal Toya was flattered and hurriedly bowed. Senior Wang, there's no need to stand on ceremony. This is what this junior should do. Before Ling Jinren left the country, he already told us about this. Everyone in Battle's sect has been preparing for many days just for the moment when Wan Jinren is born, to ensure that nothing goes wrong. In addition, His Excellency the head of state also seems to be paying special attention to this matter on Huaxiao Alliance's side. He also talked to me on the phone a long time ago. Then what did the head of state say? My lord told Senior Wang to be at ease and to leave the rest to us. Also, after spiritual master Nwan was successfully born, he would hurry up and write his story. Don't learn from this shameless Kushwan, said Immortal Toya. These were the exact words of the princeps, and he imitated them word for word. Father Wang never thought that his family's little girl would actually be able to mobilize all the members of Battle's sect. He didn't know what to say. In his shock, he could only clasp his fists and bow. Then. I'll have to trouble you. No problem. Immortal Toya gave a gentle smile. Then, he fiddled with the medicinal gourd on his back, and a spiritual mist sprayed out from the mouth of the gourd, lingering around his, Jinshi and Inshi's bodies. This was the Miracle Hand's spirit mist, which had the effect of sterilizing and disinfecting when wrapped around the body. It can be used as a portable surgical gown. At that moment, standing in front of the fridge, Immortal Toya took a deep breath. The expression on his face was solemn, but there was also some glory and pride. This was a highly anticipated delivery ceremony, and he was expected to complete the mission of delivering Wanjinren. For this, Immortal Toya felt extremely honored. Jinshi, Inshi, are you ready? Immortal Toya asked. Everything is ready according to Shifu's instructions. My little sister and I rehearsed several times before. Jinshi smiled with dimples on his face. Rehearsed? Inshi simulated giving birth, and then cough. Let's not talk about this, the operation is more important. Yes, Shifu. Father Wang somehow felt that he had learned something incredible. At the same time, somewhere else in space. With another rumble and explosion, the dazzling light of chaos seemed to pierce through the barriers of the universe as it seeped into the infinite space of the Milky Way. The monk and the grave god exchanged blows again. The monk's right arm was broken, his motionless golden body was bathed in blood, and his originally handsome face was a little swollen. The grave god was happy and at ease, as if he was teasing a bird. He held the jade Buddha head in one hand and supported himself with the other. Boring, monk. You don't even deserve to be my toy. The grave god smiled contemptuously. If you want this thing, take it. Then, he loosened his hand and abruptly raised his leg to kick the jade Buddha head at the monk as if it were a soccer ball. It looked like an ordinary blow, but it contained vast divine might and terrifying divine power. Like a meteor from outer space, it illuminated the universe. With a bang, the monk was sent flying. The jade Buddha head had hit him in the chest, and he coughed up a lot of blood as his golden body cracked inch by inch. The grave god had never expected the monk to be so vulnerable. After a few rounds, he had lost interest in the monk. He had borrowed Peng Shiren's body to inherit the right to use the heavenly tomb, which had given him endless benefits and greatly increased his strength. The grave god thought that it wouldn't be an exaggeration to call himself the overlord of the infinite Milky Way. He urgently needed to find a real expert to prove his strength. In a split second, the grave god's perception expanded infinitely from the infinite Milky Way to the Milky Way outside, analyzing every inch of space and every nebula in the universe. Finally, the grave god opened his eyes. Because at that moment, he suddenly sensed a very strong fluctuation of spirit power from Earth. Furthermore, the aura of this fluctuation definitely didn't belong to the teenager called Wang Ling. There are other experts on Earth? The grave god was instantly excited. On the other side, the blood-soaked monk had already deduced what was going on Earth. To be honest, the monk hadn't been able to predict this. He had thought that he had everything under control, and hadn't expected Wang Yuan to be born early. What was even worse was that the grave god had actually sensed this aura. How old was this spiritual master Yuan? Even if she was Ling Jinren's little sister, she was just a newborn baby. How strong could she be? The monk gritted his teeth and endured the pain all over his body as he tried to delay the grave god again. However, the grave god had already lost interest in the monk. He raised his hand and directly sent the monk flying as if he were a fly. Don't disturb me. Then, he moved to the vicinity of Earth in the blink of an eye, and used his purple eyes to track the source of the powerful fluctuation of spirit power. But to the grave god's disappointment, the result of his tracking was actually a baby girl who had just revealed her head. Was it just a child? The grave god frowned and checked his judgment over and over again, feeling that something was wrong. In the next second, he saw that the newborn baby girl actually split into a shadow and appear in front of him. She can use shadow spells at birth? The grave god smiled. To him, shadow spells weren't unusual. But in some sense, he felt that the baby girl in front of him was self-taught as soon as she was born, and in some ways could be considered a talent. She had great potential. If he captured her and trained her well, she could become his disciple or wife in the future. This was what the grave god was thinking at that moment. He then stretched out his hand to Wang Wan's shadow with a kind smile. "Little guy, are you willing to come with me? If not, I'll blow up the earth and make you homeless." Wang Wan didn't say anything, and just stretched out her little hand to shake his. Then there was a crack. She tore off the grave god's entire right arm as if it were pork jerky. The grave god felt that he had done it the wrong way. Chapter 1573. Born with great strength? The grave god was even happier. He hadn't expected this little girl to actually be able to tear off his arm, and it didn't look like she had used too much strength. Therefore, looking at this scene, the grave deity didn't feel fear. Instead, he was even more determined to take this little girl as a disciple or wife. It wouldn't be bad if he could catch her and make her a child bride. But there was one thing that the grave god didn't understand. Why did this newborn girl have such great strength? But the grave god didn't think it was an urgent question. As long as he could take this girl back, there would be plenty of time for him to conduct human research. Perhaps if he cracked this secret, he might be able to find out why that kid called Wang Ling on Earth was so strong. Girl, what a pity. You're still young and destined to be no match for me. The grave god's lips curled up slightly as he gazed at Wang Wan with his purple eyes. As countless cells divided, the arm that Wang Wan had torn off earlier regrew at a speed visible to the naked eye along with some kind of purple mucus. For the grave god at this stage, physical damage was negligible. Even if his head was cut off and his body turned into minced meat, a new head could quickly grow back. As for physical pain, when he reached the heavenly ancestor realm, he could no longer feel pain when he was one with nature. All physical pain would be transformed into heavenly pain. Just like when Wang Wan had torn off his arm just now, the moment his arm had been torn off, a meteor had fallen from the sky at the same time. And that was heavenly pain. My venerable self must take you away today. At that moment, he looked at Wang Wan confidently as he stretched out his claws in the direction of a certain coordinate on Earth. He could see that the baby girl in front of him was nothing more than a manifestation of a shadow. There was no point in taking this shadow away, the most important thing was the real body. And now, his claws were aimed at the real body. When his hands reached out, Earth was instantly shrouded in a huge shadow that blotted out the sky and the sun. But the infinitely enlarged palm print was stopped by a tremendous force before it could get close to Earth. The grave god frowned and increased the strength of his hands, but was stunned to find that no matter how much strength he exerted, the brute force resisting him would also increase. Soon, he realized the mysteriousness of this matter. Shadow? Soon after, the grave goddess could not help but reveal an expression of pleasant surprise. After he withdrew his hand, the brute force that was resisting him also disappeared. This further confirmed the conjecture of the grave goddess. Little girl, your shadow ability seems to be stronger than I thought. You can control my shadow? The grave goddess was amazed by Wang Wan's ability. He had never seen anything like that before. He had originally thought that Wang Wan's shadow ability was very limited, but he did not expect that she could not only use this ability on herself, but she could also control other people's shadows. Today, even if I have to beat you until you're half crippled, I will still bring you back. At this moment, the grave god's eyes dimmed. Wang Wan's appearance made him extremely excited. The shadow was connected to the main body. If the shadow was injured, the main body would also be injured to a certain extent. In order to ensure the integrity of the little girl, the grave god had planned to directly deal with Wang Wan's original body. However, it seemed that he had to deal with the shadow of the little girl before him first. Otherwise, even his invasion of Earth would be hindered. Buzz. At that moment, the shadow that Wang Wan had created suddenly released endless black light that spread out in all directions. It formed a whirlpool that swallowed everything in its vicinity. The grave god didn't resist this scene. He had been fighting with the mentality of playing with a child. Seeing himself as invincible, he didn't care about any ability that a baby girl could display, because she was just a child. No matter how special her ability was, it was useless until she truly grew up. Interesting. You actually used your shadow to create a space and separate the real world? The grave god couldn't help laughing again as he sensed the changes in his surroundings. Everything had a shadow, and this vast universe was no exception. In order to prevent the grave god from destroying Earth, Wang Wan had duplicated the entire solar system and created a shadow space. The battle that took place here wouldn't affect the real world. It was the same as the battle between Wang Ling and Deng Long in the inner world. Since that's the case, I can only suppress you first. At that moment, the grave god waved his big sleeves, and there was an earth-shattering rumble. The universe in front of him cracked open, creating countless storms. He was trying to break through Wang Wan's shadow space. But the grave god had missed one thing. That was the shadow space. Although the effect was similar to the inner world, it was completely different from the inner world. Wang Wan controlled Shadow Dao. All the shadows would obey Wang Wan's commands. The grave god didn't know what the consequences of his momentary carelessness would be. Now, he was in this shadow space. What on earth was he facing, with a single thought from Wang Wan? With a single thought from Wang Wan, the rampant storms in the shadow space calmed down again. Even a gust of wind had a shadow. As long as it was in this shadow space. Wang Wan was the only true god. The grave god thought of himself as invincible, and could summon the wind and rain with a wave of his hand. But no matter how he waved his sleeves, there wasn't the slightest ripple in this shadow space. The current scene was very much like how actors and actresses in ancient Xianxia dramas would awkwardly put on all kinds of chinibu poses after the special effects were gone. What the hell is this? The grave god frowned deeply. The calm smile that had been hanging on his face was finally completely shattered. A drop of cold sweat rolled down his forehead and down his cheek. He had never seen such a situation before, but he didn't think that he had lost. After all, he still had the Dharma treasures he had obtained from the heavenly tomb. Every single one of them was Dao ancestor Wang's precious collection. The supreme chaos artifact. Girl, now that things have come to this, don't blame me for being merciless. As he spoke, the light in the grave god's hand changed, and an ancient-looking revolver appeared in his palm. This was a chaos artifact named Great Era. The power of one bullet was enough to penetrate the distance of 10 Milky Way galaxies. And it couldn't be stopped. Everything that stood in the way of this bullet would be mercilessly pierced through, and then explode after being soaked by the power of chaos. The grave god could tell that this shadow space was very strange. If he had known, he would have been more careful. But it seemed a little too late to say that now, but it wasn't that easy to trap him. Hee, little guy, you didn't expect this, did you? Among these ancient chaos weapons, there's actually such a modern weapon. He didn't think too much. The grave god pulled the trigger of his revolver. Facing the speeding silver bullet, Wang Wan subconsciously closed her eyes, not because she was afraid of this bullet, but because she was a little confused by the dazzling light that the bullet reflected. This silver bullet successfully hit Wang Wan. Little girl Wan only felt as if her eyelids had been bitten by a mosquito. This silver bullet directly bounced off the little girl's eyelids, and it did not penetrate Wang Wan's armor. The moment the bullet was bounced off, little girl Wan finally smiled. It was an expression of someone who had found a new toy. She looked at the chaos weapon named Great Era in the grave god's hand, then reached out her little hand and split out a shadow to create an identical one. However, this shadow in little girl Nwan's hand was pure black. After all, this little girl was just a newborn. She was extremely curious about everything, and her learning ability was extremely strong. She played with the Great Era revolver in her hand, then imitated the grave god's previous actions and shot a bullet at him. The grave god was stunned. He never thought that even a chaos weapon could be replicated by the little girl in front of him with a shadow. The moment this shot was about to hit the grave god's head, the grave god caught it firmly with 2 fingers. It was just a bullet. It would be a little embarrassing if he couldn't even catch it. This bullet did not hit the grave god. This made Wang Wan, who was holding the gun, a little unhappy. Therefore, the little girl took a deep breath. In the next second, this shadow revolver. In little girl Nwan's hands, it changed again, this great era revolver that originally only had 6 bullets. It turned into a Gatling gun. F***CK. This shadow replica can be upgraded? The grave god looked at this scene in disbelief. Tut 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 tut. In the next second, the little girl had already controlled the upgraded weapon in her hand and fired wildly at the grave god. Chapter 1574. As a newborn baby, her curiosity towards new things and her strong ability to learn and imitate caused the goddess of the grave to suffer greatly. Moreover, Wang Wan was not an ordinary baby. Due to the support of Shadow Dao, Wang Wan was born with a powerful learning ability. For example, little girl Nwan could not only copy the grave goddess's revolver through the power of Shadow Dao. He could also analyze the same type of matter in the entire universe through the Shadow Dao. In other words, although little girl Nwan had never seen other firearms before, she could still use the power of Shadow Dao to draw inferences about the revolver in her hand. Using Shadow Dao to upgrade the Gatling was just a routine operation of the little girl. When she was tired of using the Gatling gun, Wang Wan could transform it into another gun with just a thought. When the Gatling shadow that was emitting black light transformed into the shape of another gun in his hand, the Gatling shadow that was emitting black light transformed into another gun form. The grave god, who had been shot into a hornet's nest but was still standing strong, recognized the rifle in little girl Nwan's hand. It was just that this rifle made the grave god feel very strange. He had never seen this form in the real world, so he couldn't tell what model it was. He couldn't possibly fabricate one out of thin air, right? Could it be? Suddenly, the grave god, whose body was covered in holes, thought of something that shocked him. As expected. After using the other chaos tool obtained from the heavenly tomb, the myriad world's intelligent brain, to search. The grave goddess was surprised to find out that the rifle in little girl Nwan's hand was called AK-12 Apocalypse. It was a firearm from a pay-to-win player in an FPS shooting online game. Moreover, its performance was of the gold quality. The grave goddess was completely stupefied. Equipment in a virtual game could also be synchronized. What kind of terrifying cheat was this? If there was a top-up entrance, could he do it? At this moment, the grave god's mind was spinning. The pair of purple eyes stared at the little girl in front of him, and the initial thought of, she's still a child, why don't I go easy on her, was completely dispelled. More importantly, it was replaced by jealousy. They were cultivators who had lived for thousands of years. Which one of them had not gone through untold hardships to reach this stage? However, the little girl in front of him was born with such a powerful ability. The more the grave goddess thought about it, the angrier she became. Although he had been shot by Wang Wan's gun and had holes all over his body, he did not feel any pain when the bullets passed through his flesh. The heavenly ancestor realm transcended physical pain, and physical damage was almost ineffective. But Wang Wan didn't care about that. She kept switching between different types of firearms, rifles, shotguns, and light and heavy machine guns. The endless bullets made her very happy. Little girl. I don't have time to play house with you anymore. The grave goddess shook her head as she strode forward. Killing intent rose in his heart. He felt that he shouldn't have left Wang Wan alive. The voice wasn't loud, but it echoed in the depths of one's soul, causing one's emotions to fluctuate. Wang Wan covered her ears. Against such a mental attack, the little girl still lacked combat experience. However, she tried her best to stabilize the shadow space. Don't let the space fail. Even though she lacked actual combat experience, Wang Wan could still sense what the grave goddess was thinking. The other party wanted to break through the shackles of the shadow space. Fighting here would be very disadvantageous to him. She stared at the grave goddess cautiously, her chubby little face full of wariness. Little girl, you are very talented. If you can be more humble, you will definitely have a bright future as my disciple. Unfortunately, you don't appreciate my kindness, so there's nothing I can do about it, the grave goddess said calmly without blushing. He clearly wanted to kill Wang Yuan, but he was putting on such a sanctimonious attitude. As he spoke, he put on about 9 pieces of invisible armor. These 9 pieces of armor were all very powerful chaos tools, and they had the ability to conceal their appearance, making it impossible to see them with the naked eye. Of course, the most important thing was that these 9 pieces of armor had extremely strong reflective abilities. The grave goddess was sure that she was purely relying on her great Tao ability. Because he didn't know much about this little girl's strange Tao of shadows, he could easily be at a disadvantage. Therefore, he might as well take the initiative to offer himself and provoke this little girl so that she would take the initiative to attack him. He put on 9 layers of reflective armor. Each piece reflected 1000% damage. Stacked together, it was a reflection of 9000% damage. If this little girl attacked him with all her might, she might kill herself. Because he was not familiar with the Tao ability, he would be at a disadvantage. However, in terms of sinister combat experience, fighting skills, and scheming ability, the grave goddess was known as the most cunning of cunning old foxes. He was someone who had survived the ancient battles, and he had witnessed the fall of batches of geniuses with his own eyes. How could a newborn little girl be a match for his scheming? Moreover, this little girl had just been born, so even if her Tao ability was heaven-defying, in terms of strength and physical strength, the grave goddess felt that the other party might not be that powerful. His recoil was 9000% damage. This was a gamble. Although it was a little demeaning for the grave goddess to gamble with a newborn baby girl, but no one else would know about this. As long as he killed Wang Yuan, come on, don't you want to kill me? I'll stand here and let you hit me. The grave goddess said as he took a step forward. The bullet holes on his body that were shot by Wang Yuan earlier were gradually recovering. Looking at the approaching grave goddess, little girl Yuan was a little frightened by this strange uncle in front of her. Boom! Before her tears were about to fall, Wang Yuan called out, "Hey duck," and took the initiative to punch the grave goddess with her chubby little fist. She did not know why the grave goddess insisted on hitting him. She had just been born and did not understand the tricks of aliens. She had never heard of such a strange request. Huh! The grave goddess, who was originally full of confidence and planning to counterattack Wang Yuan, suddenly felt that something was wrong. This little girl's punch was too fast, and he was slightly dazed and did not see it clearly. This punch looked ordinary, but in fact, it was shockingly powerful. It directly smashed into his chest, and a large amount of blood spurted out like a fountain with a shocking impact. Ah! The grave goddess cried out in pain. Not only was his chest pierced, but even the heavenly ancestors' pain of heaven lost its effect. He actually felt pain. And most importantly, this little girl's punch actually ignored his 9 layers of armor. The anti-damage armor on his body completely shattered. This little girl did not even lose a single hair. The promised 9000% backlash was gone. What kind of monster is this? The grave goddess was secretly surprised. In the next breath, his body recovered again. But the pain in his chest still persisted. It was only at this time that the grave goddess realized something was wrong. It turned out that there was a hole in his shadow's chest. This little girl's punch just now seemed to hit his body, but in fact, it was an attack on his shadow. After the shadow collapsed, the pain was directly reflected back to his body. It was a kind of pain that originated from the soul and spirit. And the pain of heaven could only replace the pain of the body. The damage caused to the shadow by this punch could not be replaced. This little girl, is she still human? The grave goddess secretly gritted his teeth. The shadow was hit, and he suffered a certain degree of injury. The situation seemed unfavorable, but it was not over yet. Fortunately, he still had a trick up his sleeve. Little girl, you are very strong. I have underestimated you, but I am not easy to bully. The grave goddess snorted. Although he was trapped in the shadow space at the moment, he was not completely helpless. To catch bandits, first catch their leader. Earlier when he slapped earth with his palm, the grave goddess had split 1% of his soul. This 1% of his soul was far from the strength of his main body. But if he were to sneak into earth, it would be enough. And at this time, in front of the Wang family's small villa, the 1% grave goddess appeared at the door with his arms crossed. And his target was not Wang Yuan's main body. This little girl was using her ability to fight him, and she could not even look after herself. Hence, 1% of the target was this villa, the source of all evil that had produced 2 universe-level monsters in a row. Chapter 1575. Although 1% of the grave god's strength was far from the main bodies, it was more than enough to deal with a few earthlings. 1% of the grave god's strength appeared in front of the villa. His evil purple eyes glowed faintly as he analyzed the entire villa. As the grave god thought, Wang Yuan's main body was in the middle of casting the shadow spell, which couldn't be interrupted, so the little girl couldn't take care of herself at all. Now, apart from some strange gremlins, there were no other experts in this villa. The grave god had thought that Father and Mother Wang were very strong, but after analyzing them, he realized that this couple turned out to be muggles. They were only at the body refinement stage. After Earth had been upgraded, the level of planes had risen to a higher level. The grave god was amazed that a body refinement stage could still exist. He thought that a body refinement cultivator might be able to become the Dragon King's son-in-law in an ordinary world. But in the world of the Immortal King, he didn't even deserve to live. Are they just 2 ordinary earthlings? The grave god's eyes were a little disappointed. He thought that the root of all evil, which could produce 2 cosmic monsters in a row, shouldn't be too weak. Who would have thought that they would turn out to be 2 good-for-nothings? The grave god was greatly disappointed, but at the same time he was glad. Since they were good-for-nothings, he had thousands of ways to deal with them, even if he used 1% of his strength. For Father Wang and Mother Wang, the grave god had already decided to kill one of them first as a warning to the others. He would kill the male earthling first, then, he would subdue Mother Wang and use her to threaten Wang Yuan and Wang Ling. This was the best strategy the grave god could think of at the moment. Inside the villa, Immortal Toya was relieved after Mother Wang successfully gave birth to Wang Yuan. Jean Shi and Yin Shi were still doing postpartum care for Mother Wang. In fact, it wasn't that troublesome for cultivators to give birth, and there was no such thing as confinement. Ever since Mother Wang became pregnant with Wang Yuan, the one thing the Wang family didn't lack was tonics. Just the elixirs given by Old Master's son from Huaguo Water Curtain Group were enough for Mother Wang to recover quickly after giving birth. Coupled with the golden acupuncture set given to her by Taoist priest Tai, who was known as the Dragon King of the East Sea, Mother Wang would immediately recover by today, and might even break through her realm, which she hadn't been able to do for a long time. At that moment, Immortal Toya was teaching Father Wang the method of piercing acupoints. After 10 o'clock tonight, starting from the Taijia Xian needle, acupuncture every hour will do. Understood. Father Wang nodded. After Taijia black needles is Tai black needles, then Tai Bing black needles, Tating black needles, Tai Wu black needles. I've memorized them all. That's good. Immortal Toya nodded. This was the first time he was involved in such a ritualistic delivery. Moreover, although he came to deliver the baby, he didn't actually help much. All he did was clean up and disinfect after the surgery. That was because Spiritual Master Nguyen had slid out of the womb on his own and even tied a Chinese knot with the umbilical cord. Then, he inexplicably entered a meditative state, as if he had fallen asleep. Moreover, when she was born, Wang Yuan's body was clean. There wasn't even a trace of blood or filth. She looked like a little angel that had descended to the mortal world. Even with his many years of cultivation, Immortal Toya had never seen such a miraculous scene. It was said that a daughter was a father's little cotton-padded jacket. Now that Wang Yuan was born, Immortal Toya's heart was moved for a moment, and he really did want to find a partner to marry and have children with. Furthermore, it would be best if it was a daughter. How nice. Immortal Toya sighed with emotion in his heart. Congratulations again, Senior Wang, on receiving a little cotton-padded jacket. Immortal Toya cupped his hands in salute. Thank you for your hard work, Immortal Toya. Father Wang raised his hand to return the salute, but he couldn't help smiling wryly despite the joy on his face. He didn't know whether their daughter was a little cotton-padded jacket or not. But she was definitely a little explosive, and definitely wouldn't be able to get away. But Wang Wan didn't cry or make a fuss after she was born, and looked unusually quiet, which was a little different from what Father Wang had imagined. When he had been born, he had made a fuss, but when he grew up, he had instead become autistic. There were two sides to every coin. With experience, Father Wang knew that this might be an illusion. When little girl Nguyen grew up, she might be a lively girl. Do you want to stay for dinner tonight? Father Wang asked at that moment. Immortal Toya was overwhelmed by the favor. He knew that this kind of opportunity didn't come by often, so he didn't dare refuse. Junior, it would be impolite to refuse. Don't call me Junior. Father Wang scratched his head a little awkwardly. Logically speaking, Immortal Toya was much older than him. So was grenade-throwing Senior Immortal. In the end, every time the two of them came to the Wang family's small villa, they would call him Junior, which made Father Wang feel like he didn't know what to do. He knew that this was all a figment of his imagination. He had given birth to Wang Ling and Wang Yuan one after another. Now, this group of people had imagined their whole family to be big shots living in seclusion. Father Wang had previously thought that it was good to pretend to hide their identities. But now that they were so familiar with each other, he felt that there was actually no need. Actually, I'm younger than you, and so are you and grenade throwing. There's no need to stand on ceremony, said Father Wang. Unfortunately, the concept of big shots living in seclusion was already deeply ingrained in the hearts of the core members of Battle's sect. It would probably be hard to remove it for the time being. Immortal Toya, Jr. wouldn't dare. Father Wang laid his cards on the table. I'm actually at the body refinement stage, Immortal Toya, Sr., you're joking again. Father Wang, in the kitchen, Father Wang was about to prepare the ingredients for dinner. The person working the hardest today was Mother Wang, so Father Wang decided to personally cook. It wasn't that he didn't know how to cook, it was just that he was usually too lazy to do it. At most, he would help out a little. It was only today that Father Wang wanted Mother Wang to rest for a while, so he had also taken a leave of absence from writing novels. Instead, he spent all his energy with his family. Senior, do you need help? Asked Immortal Toya. Just sit down. Father Wang smiled. He had just taken a few potatoes out of the bag and picked up a kitchen knife when the villa's alarm suddenly rang. Was it an illegal intrusion? Father Wang frowned slightly and directly went out with the kitchen knife in hand to open the villa's main door. What he didn't expect was that what greeted him was a ball of energy that looked even more dazzling than the sun. Go to hell. 1% of the grave gods had only stretched out one finger to create this extremely frightening east wind wave. It was more than enough to kill Father Wang. As long as one was hit by this east wind wave, the target would be instantly sucked into the space and crushed into pieces. The grave god felt that this single spell was the most ideal as long as it didn't cause widespread destruction. What is this? Looking at the ball of light rapidly approaching, Father Wang was so alarmed that he dropped his kitchen knife and subconsciously raised his arm to block it. Then, there was a bang. With a crisp sound, this ball of light was smashed to pieces by Father Wang's arm like a golf ball. Father Wang never thought that the Qilan arm, which Wang Ling had enlightened him before he left, would actually play a crucial role. 1% of the grave god was stupefied at this scene. Was this the freaking body refinement stage? Behind Father Wang, Immortal Toya had an adoring look on his face. Senior is too strong. I knew you were being modest all along. Father Wang, this time, it looked like he wouldn't be able to explain his identity as a big shot. Chapter 1576. 1% of the grave god was horrified. Even though it was a soul clone with 1% of its power, no ordinary cultivator from Earth could withstand the power of this East Fengli. But this male Earthling in front of it was clearly just at the body refinement stage. He had actually completely defeated East Fengli with just his arms. 1% of the grave god was horrified. Could this Wang Jiao be a cultivator with a body refinement level of 200 million? How could there be such an outrageous existence in this cultivation world? He felt that he had to reevaluate Father Wang's strength. The man in front of it probably wasn't as simple as he looked. After all, this was a human who had given birth to 2 monsters in a row. Even if it used its butt to think, the other party couldn't just be an ordinary Earthling. If he could tear apart his East Fengli with just his arms, then the other party was definitely someone with deep secrets. I didn't expect you to have such strength. 1% of the grave god broke out in a cold sweat and slid down his cheeks. At that moment, the atmosphere instantly became very heavy. On the other side, Father Wang was actually also very flustered. As an artist who made a living with the keyboard, Father Wang had always been a scholar. When was the last time he had hit someone? He didn't know many martial arts techniques. At most, he was at the level of the national 3rd set of radio gymnastics for middle school students, plus a little bit of military boxing. The person he was facing now was a big shot who had come to pick a fight with him, and was obviously a villain. Father Wang couldn't help feeling a little nervous. He didn't know who on earth this grave god was, he just felt that the other party was very oppressive. If it wasn't for the fact that Wang Ling had enlightened Father Wang's arms so that they were now like 2 electric water pumps, Father Wang's ability to withstand pressure. Father Wang felt that it was very likely that he would pass out on the spot in front of this grave god. The most frightening thing was that Immortal Toya behind him thought that he was a true senior expert. He was also fearlessly fanning the flames. Immortal Toya, my dear friend, Senior Wang's home isn't a place where you can come and go as you please. Senior Wang is a hidden expert. He doesn't cause trouble, and he isn't afraid of trouble. Senior Wang, forever a god. Father Wang, 1% of the grave god folded his arms and sneered. Do you know who I am? Immortal Toya, I don't care who you are, even if you're the overlord of the universe. If Senior Wang were to punch you, would you dare to take it? Father Wang, the 1% grave god frowned. You might not believe it, but I'm really the ruler of the universe. Immortal Toya, there's only one dad in this world. That's our Father Wang, Senior Wang. Who do you think you are? How dare you speak to Senior Wang like that? Quickly kneel down and apologize to Senior Wang. Listening to Immortal Toya's words, Father Wang looked calm on the surface, but he was actually panicking. Actually, it wasn't that he couldn't understand Immortal Toya's current mood. In the other party's heart, he was a senior expert who was like an idol. Since he had a worshipping attitude, it was normal for him to unconsciously use words to protect him. This was a common rule in online public opinion battles. No one can criticize my idol. But the current situation made Father Wang very nervous, and he really didn't know how to deal with it. In the face of the grave god, the pressure on Father Wang multiplied. But at that moment, he suddenly heard an overlapping voice in his head. The mysterious voice, "Don't panic, we're here." Father Wang, ? Had he been so nervous that he was hallucinating? At that moment, Father Wang was indescribably terrified. Don't be nervous. We're your left and right hands. Hearing this, Father Wang sucked in a cold breath. F***K. His left and right hands had actually turned into spirits after being enlightened. You don't need to speak, just communicate with us in your mind. I'm left hand. You can call me Little Left, or by my name, Kato. I'm right hand. You can call me Little Right, or by my name, Eagle. You actually have your own consciousness. Father Wang was completely petrified, and his mind was in turmoil. AI, we didn't want to come out at first. After all, if you knew of our existence, you might have to ask us to help you type in the future. It's probably every author's dream to have a pair of left and right hands that can move on their own. But the situation is urgent now, so Little Right and I have no choice but to take action. So who on earth is this person? A person who claims to be the overlord of the universe, a living fossil who has lived since time immemorial. After gaining a little bit of strength, he became arrogant. Right now, his main body is fighting with the shadow clone that Anwan created in space. So, Anwan hasn't said anything until now because the shadow clone is fighting with this person's main body in space? That's right. Hearing this, Father Wang couldn't help trembling. He knew it. His daughter wasn't someone to be trifled with. She had just been born, but she had already started to maintain the peace of the universe. When she grew up, what would happen? But Father Wang had never expected that his opponent would actually be the overlord of the universe. Although the other party had given himself that title, it was obvious that he was someone with some ability. After Little Left and Little Right's awakening, Father Wang's nervousness subsided a lot. Because the following battle would be fully automated, and Father Wang didn't need to take the initiative at all. On the other side, the grave god in front of him actually didn't realize how serious the problem was. You must die today. 1% of the grave god's eyes narrowed. His arms stretched out from an extremely far distance as he suddenly grabbed at Father Wang. His 5 slender fingers were like the tentacles of an octopus as he charged at Father Wang in that instant. The grave god's movement was so fast that Father Wang couldn't predict it with his naked eye at all. But at that moment, he had nothing to fear. Because he believed in his son. And even more so in his left and right hands. He was the head of the Wang family's small villa. So when his family was in danger, he naturally had to step forward bravely and fight like a man. Charge! At that moment, Father Wang's blood boiled. He didn't say a word, but he was already roaring wildly in his heart. Mutta 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 mutta, Little Left and Little Right were even faster than 1% of the grave god. The moment they stretched out their 10 fingers, they began to split apart, and each finger actually grew hundreds of tentacles. Thousands of tentacles fell from the sky like meteors, falling down at an invisible speed, instantly destroying 1% of the graveyard god's arm. In the end, the tentacles bombarded 1% of the grave god's body countless times. 1% of the grave god's body was too horrible to look at. Smoke rose from all over its body, and it gave off a burnt smell. Then, its entire body disintegrated and scattered into dust. At the same time, in space, the grave god's true body spat out a mouthful of blood. Chapter 1577. The moment 1% of the grave god's soul was defeated by Father Wang's great wood chaotic fist, dying old master, the damage from the backlash was transmitted back to the grave god's body. He had never expected that the 1% of his soul that he had scattered to earth would be defeated. This result was difficult for him to accept. In fact, not to mention him, even the core members of the war sect were dumbstruck when they saw this scene. It turned out that Father Wang had decided to stand up like a man and face the 1% of the grave gods head-on. Immortal Toya broadcasted the entire battle live to the group chat of Battle Sect's core members. In the eyes of many core members of Battle Sect like grenade-throwing senior Immortal, the seniors in the Wang family's small villa had lived modestly and ordinarily for a long time, staying at home with the air conditioner, connected to Wi-Fi, and experiencing human suffering. As far as they could remember, they had never seen Father Wang fight. But at that moment, Immortal Toya's live stream completely shattered everyone's memories, and was followed by cheers from all the core members of Battle Sect. This is Senior Wang? Senior Wang was so powerful. I've never seen him fight before. I thought he was just an ordinary person. Lightning Dharmaraja's eyes were filled with horror. He recalled the few times he had visited the Wang family's small villa to test Father Wang. In the end, because he was too timid, he did not dare to make a move. At this time, he was extremely glad that he had chickened out at that time. Fortunately, he didn't make a move. If they were to fight, would he still be alive today? This is what you don't understand, Dharmaraja. The seniors of the Wang clan are not ordinary people. I've thought so since a long time ago. Grenade-throwing senior Immortal had a look of amazement and approval in his eyes, and at the same time, he deeply admired Father Wang. It was fine if he did not make a move, but when he did, it was shocking, as expected of Brother Ling and little girl Nguyen's father. A man who consecutively gave birth to two universe-level monsters. In some sense, grenade-throwing Senior Immortal felt that Father and Mother Wang were the strongest. In comparison, he would actually rather believe that Father Wang, Mother Wang, and Grandfather Wang were very powerful people. If these three had all been ordinary people, then how they had given birth to Wang Ling and Wang Nguyen would probably be an unsolved mystery of the universe. Even if it was a genetic mutation, it shouldn't be this sudden. Meanwhile, on Sun Island, Lotus Sun stared at the scene before her in astonishment, deep in thought. He was one of the few people who knew that Father and Mother Wang were indeed ordinary people who didn't have the strength to truss a chicken. The girl subconsciously thought of Father Wang as the mastermind behind this attack. It had to be Wang Ling. From the content of the video, it looked a little like classmate Wang Ling's enlightening spell. Could he have enlightened Uncle Wang's left and right arms? Although Wang Ling didn't tell Lotus Sun about this. But with Lotus Sun's current understanding of the youngster, she was still able to guess most of the truth. Wang Ling was really too powerful. Uncle Wang, an ordinary person, was able to kill 1% of the grave god's soul with just a single enchantment spell. Although it was only 1%, but his opponent was a self-proclaimed overlord of the universe, an ancient being. With such a huge amount of energy, even 1% of the power was far beyond the level of the most powerful perfected immortal on Earth. It was only for an instant. Wang Ling's tall and imposing image in Lotus Sun's heart rose considerably. However, it's really shocking. Little girl Nguyen was just born, but she's actually able to restrain the grave god's true form. Wang Ming moved closer to Lotus Sun to watch the live broadcast. He was actually also a core member of Battle's sect, but he hadn't been added to the group as a way of avoiding suspicion. But this actually didn't stop him from obtaining information. If there was anything he wanted to know, he could directly ask Wang Ling. Now that Lotus Sun had been added to the group, he could also ask her about things Wang Ling didn't want to say. To put it bluntly, even if she was his future sister-in-law, she was one of them. Of course, while everyone was cheering for Father Wang and Wang Nguyen, there was one person who was out of the ordinary. This person was none other than Jai Yin. What are you talking about? I don't understand. Jai Yin had a puzzled expression on her face. It's nothing. Wang Ming took the initiative to say, it's just that little girl Nguyen was born just now, and Rong Rong is showing me a picture. Because he hadn't gotten grenade-throwing Senior Immortal's permission to be a core member of Battle's sect, Wang Ming had no choice but to play it safe. Ah. Little girl Wang Nguyen was born? Does this count as premature? Jai Yin was astonished. Is she very weak? Sort of, but she really isn't weak. Saying this, Wang Ming subconsciously glanced at Wang Ling listening to Jai Yin's words. He smiled bitterly in his heart. This premature baby in your eyes is now facing off against an ancient expert who claims to be the overlord of the universe. How can she be called weak? Seeing Wang Ming's expression, Jai Yin felt that she understood. Oh. I got it. Is little girl Nguyen as powerful as your younger brother the moment she makes a move? Wang Ming nodded and couldn't help pinching Jai Yin's cheek as he smiled. Factor, I realize that sometimes you're really slow on the uptake. This is too complicated, it would be hard for anyone else to accept it, Jai Yin said. Then, Wang Ming almost knelt down on the spot at her next words. By the way, how strong was little girl Nguyen when she was born? Is she already at the foundation establishment stage? Wang Ming, Lotus Sun, Wang Ling. In fact, Wang Ling had already noticed Wang Nguyen's birth in the waiting room. There was no active response. It was purely a sixth sense that stemmed from their blood relationship that made him realize that he finally had a younger sister. Far away on Sun Island, across the vast ocean, Wang Ling took a deep breath. Even from such a distance, he could smell the baby milk fragrance that came with little girl Nguyen when she was born. After having a younger sister, Wang Ling suddenly had a special feeling. He felt as if he was no longer alone. After so many years, all the loneliness and pain that had been sealed up in his heart finally had a second person to understand. A happy mood arose in Wang Ling's heart. But before this emotion could be reflected on his face through his brain nerves, it was suppressed by a force. Hence, little girl Nuan was born. On the surface, Wang Ling seemed a lot calmer than he had imagined. This was his sister's battle. He had actually been paying attention all this time. He paid close attention to every movement of the grave god's main body, afraid that the other party would be too ruthless and hurt little girl Nuan. But Wang Ling was actually very clear. The reason why little girl Nuan could not wait to be born was because she wanted to challenge this powerhouse of the eternal level universe. He had thought that he would be able to help little girl Nuan when she needed it the most. But looking at the current outcome, little girl Nuan didn't seem to need help, but just in case, Wang Ling still left the grave god a slap. Chapter 1578. He wasn't an ordinary person. The grave god's main body furrowed his brows. After losing 1% of his soul power, the pain from the backlash caused him to furrow his brows. Because of Peng Shiren's body, the grave god had inherited the benefits of the entire heavenly tomb. But now, the grave god found that he seemed to be restrained by this physical body. In the end, it was not as useful as his original body. Because the strength of his physical body was lower than his original body, the pain of the backlash was doubled, and his flexibility was much lower than before. His heart was filled with amazement. Now, even he was beginning to doubt whether or not he could defeat this baby. I don't believe I can't kill you. The grave god's face turned pale. For some reason, the more he fought with Wang Nuan, the more he felt like a pathetic clown. In this uneasiness, the grave god began to frantically sacrifice the chaos weapons he had obtained in the heavenly tomb. The Grand Supreme Staff. He roared, holding a 6-winged Supreme Being staff in his hand, brandishing it towards Wang Nuan, stirring up a golden wave. Legend had it that it was made from the phoenix feathers of the time divine beast, the chaotic black phoenix. This was a wave of time that could make time pass rapidly. Those who were covered by it would be weakened and die of old age. However, to the grave god's surprise, Wang Nuan actually used her shadow Dao to replicate a Supreme Exalt's weapon. It was just that this Grand Supreme armament wasn't 6-winged. It was 66-winged. Little girl Nuan directly replicated and upgraded it to a Grand Supreme staff with 66 wings, and it was a plus. An even greater wave of golden aging swept towards the graveyard goddess. Not only did they devour his time waves, but they also completely covered the grave god. The pain of aging caused many cracks to appear on the grave god's young body. After the waves had passed, his skin was completely sagging and the muscles all over his body had disappeared. He was like a piece of sponge that had been drained of water and had shriveled up. However, the power of aging did not kill him. The grave god absorbed the power of chaos in the space and used it to replenish his body, bit by bit, to restore his body. Then, in the following battle, the previous scene repeated like sit-ups. The grave god sacrificed, Celestial Knight Spear. Wang Nuan copied and upgraded, Tianba Knight Shock Shot Plus. The grave god summoned the Ku's shield, which was made from the skin of the most shameless author in history, Ku Xian. It released a light wave that slowed down Wang Nuan's movements. Wang Nuan copied and leveled up, Ancient Wood Shield. The grave god summoned, Primordial Whip. Wang Nuan copied and leveled up, Primordial Whip Daddy. As the battle progressed, the grave goddess discovered an awkward situation. He thought he had earned the entire heavenly tomb with Peng Shiren's body. This was a very good deal. But he never thought that the little girl in front of him could use her shadow doctrine ability to replicate the eternal chaotic period that he had inherited from Heaven Tomb even if she didn't inherit it. In other words, the more chaos weapons he used in the heavenly tomb, the faster the other party would grow. Not only that, but he could also draw inferences and upgrade his Dharma artifact. No matter what kind of chaos weapon he used, it would be countered in the end. Suddenly, the grave god was shocked to find that he had become a tool. He carefully recalled the entire process from controlling Peng Shiren's body to successfully finding the entrance to the heavenly tomb and defeating the old woman guarding the tomb. The grave god's brows suddenly furrowed as she sensed that something was wrong. Because everything seemed to be going too smoothly. How could a cunning old man like Tao Ancestor Wang only send an old woman to guard the entrance to such an important place like the heavenly tomb? The grave god had fought with Tao Ancestor Wang many times, so he had a good understanding of Tao Ancestor Wang's character. Now that he thought about it carefully, he felt that all of this was a calculated trap. If that old man had predicted that after he switched to Peng Shiren's body, his combat power would actually be limited. He predicted that the enemy he would face in the future would be this strange shadow girl in front of him. He predicted that all the Dharma artifacts he had inherited in the heavenly tomb would be countered by this girl. At that moment, the grave god didn't dare to continue thinking about it. To him, Tao Ancestor Wang was already dead. How could an old man whose whereabouts were unknown be able to predict what would happen today from 10,000 years ago? That was impossible. It couldn't be like this. Although the grave god didn't want to admit it, there was a little fear in his eyes at that moment. And now, the problem in front of him was Wang Yuan. At that moment, the grave god had no other choice. He had to kill the girl in front of him to prove that he hadn't been tricked by Tao Ancestor Wang. After thinking about it, he directly reached out to grab Wang Yuan. He didn't believe that as a heavenly ancestor, he couldn't even deal with a newborn baby girl. If he was defeated by Wang Yuan here, he would be forever engraved in the history of the heavenly tomb. However, what awaited him was Wang Yuan's merciless ravaging. A black square engraving appeared, which looked like something that the grave god had seen in the heavenly tomb. A huge pressure turned into the word human and bombarded his body. The grave god couldn't feel physical pain, but when these engraving hit his body, a terrifying energy burst out that penetrated deep into his soul. Then, the human character engraved on his body exploded after it sank into the depths of his soul. The explosion caused the tomb god's body to explode. It was as if he had just swallowed a few firecrackers. Human Tao seal. How could she have this? The grave god was even more shocked. This was because little girl Yuan had taken out a heavenly tomb chaos weapon that he had never shown before. Human Tao seal. This was a chaos weapon that the grave god found in a golden coffin in the heavenly tomb. It was very old, and although it was very strong, it was no longer as powerful as it used to be. It was so badly damaged that it couldn't be used again. However, the grave god didn't throw it away. He planned to keep it for now, hoping to find a way to repair it in the future. In the heavenly tomb, it was damaged like the human Tao seal. However, there were many powerful chaos weapons that were once famous in ancient times. The current situation made the grave god realize that something was wrong. He had never shown this damaged item before. This girl could actually use the ability of shadow to restore it, and even repair it at the same time. At that moment, the grave god was completely silent. This was because he thought of a shocking fact that he had to admit, that was, the little girl in front of him was very likely to have used his shadow Tao ability. She had replicated the entire heavenly tomb. P.S. There's a character design of the grave god in the Easter egg chapter, but it hasn't been colored yet. It's just a sketch to complete the grave god's current appearance. This is the appearance of the grave god after he took over Peng Shiren's body and merged with Peng Shiren. In other words, part of the human's appearance belongs to Peng Shiren. Chapter 1579. The moment the grave god recognized the reality, 5 words popped up in his mind. That was, how the F***ck was he supposed to fight? He had worked so hard to obtain the right to inherit the heavenly tomb, but it had been replicated by a little girl using her own power. This was a reality that the grave god did not dare to imagine or accept. Now that he was trapped in the shadow space, he was being restricted by Wang Yuan. Coupled with the continuous impact of the human seal, the grave god's face turned pale. He did not want to lose to a baby. Therefore, he had to think of a way to get out of this predicament. An immemorial level powerhouse, a being that had existed since the beginning of the universe. Countless people had turned into ghastly white skeletons over the eons, but the tomb god was still alive. The reason behind this was most likely due to the continuous accumulation of experience and some special factors. At this moment, the grave god stared at Wang Yuan and pondered deeply. Although the current situation was extremely disadvantageous to him, he had never thought of showing his trump card in front of a girl who had just been born. He thought back to the battle between him and Dao ancestor Wang. He did not use that trump card even when he was on the verge of death. Instead, he endured it patiently. In the eyes of others, it was a psychological battle between the Eternal Realm powerhouses. The grave god knew that his final trump card was something that even Dao ancestor Wang was afraid of. Therefore, that old thing only dared to seal him separately and did not dare to kill him. That old thing knew his personality very well. If he thought that this was a dead end, he would definitely drag someone down with him. However, the current situation was not a dead end for the grave god. It was just a dead end. Just like a game of chess, he believed that as long as he played it well, he could still turn the tables. At this moment, the grave god's brows furrowed, and countless black seals seeped out of every inch of his skin, covering his entire body like crawling insects. At the same time, his evil purple eyes burst out with a shocked light, as if he was analyzing something. Immediately afterward, the grave god's face lit up with ecstasy, and he smiled again. I see. This is the power of the Shadow Dao. As if he had seen through something, he once again fell into a condescending posture. Facing the grave goddess, Wang Yuan couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. She didn't know why, but she did feel that the aura of this monster in front of her was different from before. He became much more cautious. Inside the Battle Sex Core conference room. Through the prediction, sword light, Audiobook released the image of the battle between Wang Yuan and the grave god in space. It turns out that apart from cutting vegetables, pre-cooking also has such a function. Everyone was surprised. Foresight is the sword of prophecy, the sword of destiny. Sword light itself has the ability to analyze time and space, Audiobook said. The expression on his face should have been one of pride, but the situation of the battle and the universe seemed a little off. What is that grave goddess up to this time? I'm not sure, but I have a feeling that this person is different from before. It's like there's an additional aura of the great Tao. An additional aura of the great path? Very quickly, grenade-throwing senior Immortal seemed to think of something, and he abruptly raised his head. Could it be that the other party can be like Brother Ling, and finish learning one Tao in an extremely short time? Has he learned little sister Nuan's Shadow Tao? That's impossible. Many of the core members were shocked and incredulous. They couldn't understand it, because it really made their scalps go numb. But there seemed to be only one explanation for the situation in front of them. When all was said and done, the other party was Eternal Evil God, who had given Dao ancestor Wang such a headache back then that he hadn't been able to completely get rid of him. Having this kind of ability was unexpected, but also reasonable. While everyone was pondering this, there was another upheaval in the universe's shadow space. The originally stable shadow space was now in turmoil, as if it was about to burst open. An extremely powerful energy fluctuation was released. This was the power of Shadow Dao, without a doubt. But the most horrifying thing was that it wasn't Wang Yuan who had released this energy. There was a loud boom. The pre-broadcast image was instantly cut off. Elsewhere, in the waiting room for the Sun Island contestants. At that moment, Wang Ming suddenly felt his vision darken as a force stopped him and forced him to withdraw the brain waves he had scattered into the universe. What's wrong? Jai Yin walked over with concern and touched Wang Ming's forehead. It was very hot, but it wasn't his limit yet. Seeing this, Lotus Sun skillfully cast the temperature-lowering spell on Wang Ming. There was a ripping sound. A large amount of white fog was instantly released from the top of Wang Ming's head. Much better. Wang Ming heaved a sigh of relief. He had been watching the battle with his brain waves just now, and had directly linked them to the nerves of little Nuan's original body. Then, he had seen little Nuan's shadow fighting the grave god. There had been no problem at first, but in the end, in that second, after the grave god's devilish smile, the nerve link had been forcibly cut off. Ling Ling, something doesn't seem right," Wang Ming said as he rubbed his head. At that moment, he saw that Wang Ling was already sitting cross-legged in a corner of the waiting room, his soul out of his body and his mind wandering. Wang Ming couldn't help laughing. "It seems that someone is more anxious than I thought." But before he could finish speaking, it only lasted for a few seconds. Wang Ling withdrew his thoughts and opened his eyes again. The reason was that An Wan still wanted to fight, and had chased him away. When all is said and done, she is an immemorial expert, and her combat experience is incomparable to An Wan's. You shouldn't spoil her so much. Besides, that person has already learned Shadow Dao. Her abilities and room for growth are beyond our imagination. Wang Mingming was clearly worried. "It's fine." Wang Ling shook his head. His mind had wandered off just now. Although Little Nuan had chased him away, he had made a basic assessment of the current situation. The grave god had indeed learned Shadow Dao in a very short period of time, and had indeed tried to use it to unlock the shadow space. Her learning ability surpassed that of all the opponents Wang Ling had encountered before. But unfortunately, the grave god actually didn't realize what kind of opponent it was facing. The purpose of Dao's existence wasn't just to imitate. Some people were born with heavenly Dao, but the very existence of heavenly Dao, as well as the order and rules established behind it, were all determined by the original creator. Since Wang Nuan was the founder of Shadow Dao, she had supreme authority. Thus, it was useless even if the grave god had learned it. Because Wang Nuan could confiscate it. Of course, the above order and rules, there was only one person in the universe who could ignore them. And that person was Wang Ling. Chapter 1580. The grave god's ability to learn was astonishing. Although Wang Nuan had just been born, she had the memories of when she was just a cell. In Wang Nuan's impression, before she was born, the only person in the universe who had such a strong ability to learn was her brother Wang Ling. She didn't expect the grave god to be able to analyze Shadow Dao in just a few short minutes. Furthermore, the grave god's goal was very clear. The instant he learned Shadow Dao, he immediately attacked the shadow space. The shadow space was Wang Nuan's personal domain. If she kept fighting here, there was no way she could win. That was because the grave god's strategy was very clear. He didn't linger, but directly tore open an exit in the shadow space and fled. When Wang Nuan chased after him, she saw an ancient decree burning in the universe outside the space, as if it was carrying out some ancient ritual. As the decree burned, a majestic horn sounded in the universe, as if thousands of soldiers and horses were attacking. For a moment, countless black ribbons crisscrossed in the surroundings. Some of the ribbons bombarded Wang Nuan. Wang Nuan HP -0.001. It was hard to imagine that a newborn baby girl could actually survive unscathed in this chaotic, apocalyptic universe. This doomsday-like scene accompanied the burning of the decree. It lasted for several minutes, but it felt as long as millions of years. Wang Nuan suddenly noticed that the surroundings were no longer like those on Earth. It seemed that the grave god had burned the decree. He had used the power of the decree to forcibly shift space. "Girl, the land you're on is my core stronghold in the infinite universe. Those lowly Earth cultivators like to call places like this intrinsic spirit field, but that's just the tip of the iceberg." The grave god sneered. Above the intrinsic spirit field were the small world, the great world, and the core world. This was the ability of high-level almighty cultivators to create a world inside their bodies and construct nomological laws. If every cell in the human body was regarded as a living person, then the human body itself was an existence similar to the universe. And the universe they were in right now might just be a cell in another person's body. Of course, the ability to construct world nomological laws inside one's body was extremely strong. In such a world, the creator of the world was a god. Wang Nuan frowned slightly. An existence even stronger than the core world was the core of chaos. It was a supreme world that was gradually built with the chaotic force of the universe as its foundation. Not many people could construct such a world. Only an ancient living fossil like the grave god could do it. Because the paramount worlds were too vast, they usually couldn't be stored in one's body. He could only choose another place to develop it. Such a mechanism was slightly similar to the Heavenly Tao experimental grounds that Tao ancestor Wang had created when he was establishing the Heavenly Tao, the unspeakable land. That was actually a type of supreme world, but it was a simplified version. The supreme world that Wang Wan was currently in was led by the grave god, and it was tens of thousands of times larger than the unspeakable land. The sky was shrouded in purple chaotic clouds, and the barren and cracked land was devoid of life. Such a supreme world often symbolized the heart of the Creator. On top of a barren ancient mountain, Wang Wan looked around. Every inch of land in this world was filled with graves. Written on it were all the ancient experts that the grave god had killed in the past. He was probably affected by the summoning decree and was forcibly summoned here. He was tortured by the grave god until he used up the last of his strength, lost his ancient glory, and was forever buried in the cold soil of this supreme world, after being summoned here. Although Wang Wan had already turned off the grave god's shadow path, the person in front of her no longer cared. As expected, it's just as I thought. You are the creator of this path. The grave god's eyes narrowed. When he first learned the shadow path, he had focused his energy on tearing the shadow path space, and then set up a trap for Wang Wan to enter his supreme world. His goal was clear, to break through the shadow path space. After achieving this goal, the grave god didn't mind even if Wang Wan turned off the shadow path. In this supreme world, he was the true master. Although Wang Wan had the ability to control shadows, in this world, the grave god also had the ability to control every blade of grass, every tree, and even every inch of shadow. This was not the power of the shadow path, but a type of authority that originated from the supreme world. It was equivalent to restricting Wang Wan. Little girl, the situation seems to have turned. The grave god's voice was distant and lingering. It passed through the land of this supreme world, as if it could be transmitted to the other side of the universe. He floated in the air with his hands behind his back, slowly traversing the land under his feet. Every grave here belonged to an ancient almighty that he had personally killed. Among these people, there were some who were born as geniuses, but in the end, they still lost to him. Some of the names on these tombstones had already been worn away by time. Even the grave god couldn't remember who was buried here. He had killed too many geniuses and almighties, so it was impossible for him to remember all of their names. However, these people with tombstones were at least opponents who had lasted 3 minutes against him. Those who couldn't hold on for more than 3 minutes were like small mounds of dirt in this supreme world. These people didn't even deserve to have names. Little girl, you should feel lucky, because you will soon have a tombstone with your name on it, the grave god said. He looked at Wang Wan on the top of a distant mountain. My venerable self will erect this tombstone on the highest mountain. Of all my current opponents, apart from Tao ancestor Wang, you are the one who has fought with me the longest. But once you enter this place, you won't have the chance to turn things around. As soon as he finished speaking, all of a sudden, a cacophony of voices rang out from all directions in the supreme world. It was as if millions upon millions of living beings were weeping. The powerful experts who had been buried in the ground throughout the ages were filled with a powerful sense of resentment that exploded out. It was like a flood crashing down on Wang Wan, as if the sky was falling down. Wang Wan, who had been confident in her victory, started to regret not accepting Wang Ling's help earlier. She had just been born, but her first opponent was an ancient overlord of the universe. The pressure of this supreme world was like a raging storm in her heart. Wang Wan tried her best to stabilize herself, but this terrifying resentment was too strong. It seemed a little difficult for her baby body to withstand it. A baby is just a baby in the end. The grave god sneered at this scene. Seeing Wang Wan's red face and how hard she had tried, he couldn't help feeling a little smug. The grave god pressed down with his hand, increasing the pressure again. He had thought that he would be able to take care of Wang Wan very quickly. But what the grave god never expected was that when he decided to increase the pressure for the third time, a full 5 minutes had already passed. What a monster. The grave god was astonished. Ordinary 10,000 ancient realm experts wouldn't be able to last more than a few seconds under the pressure of his paramount realm. The person with the highest record held on for about 10 seconds. But the little girl in front of him had actually lasted 5 minutes under 50% of his world pressure. Should I use all my strength? The grave god's eyes narrowed. He had never tried using 100% of his world pressure before, because it was easy to cause the world to collapse if he didn't do it properly. But to completely destroy Wang Yuan now, the grave god was determined. Little girl, let's see how long you can last. The grave god didn't show any mercy. He pressed down with his hand for the 4th time, increasing the pressure from 50% to 80%. Then, he continued to increase the pressure. Under this pressure, Wang Yuan finally felt a little tired. She held her breath, and a teardrop squeezed out of her red face and fell to the ground. It was also at this moment the grave god suddenly felt that his supreme world was being invaded by a foreign object. He didn't stop the pressure. Instead, he carefully observed Wang Yuan. He had a feeling that the little girl wouldn't be able to hold on for much longer. But the grave god didn't expect this. When Wang Yuan's tears fell, on that barren ancient mountain, there was actually a tender green blade of grass that grew against all the pressure. Then, a green protective sword light seeped out of the crack on the barren ancient mountain and gently wrapped around Wang Yuan. Chapter 1581. The extremely powerful sword light had a spirituality that could dispel all pressure, and instantly formed a resistance against the infinite resentment in the supreme world. The grave god was alarmed by this scene. He never expected Wang Yuan's tear to actually turn the situation around at this critical moment. In the waiting room, Wang Ling observed the battle from a distance, and at the same time shared the image with Wang Ming's mind. His 2 elder brothers were closely watching the development of the battle. So Leng Ming is here. I see. The moment he saw that green blade of grass appear, Wang Ming felt relieved. He was pondering a question. If Wang Ling was an immortal king, then Wang Yuan was an immortal sister. Then, Yuan's tear was the legendary, Sister Juice. The corner of Wang Ling's mouth twitched. He pretended that he hadn't heard anything. Leng Ming's appearance was within Wang Ling's expectations, because Leng Ming had a mechanism to begin with. Usually, it was the sword master's blood that could trigger this spirit blade that saves the master effect. This was a built-in rule for all the sword spirits produced in the Sword King world. As long as they recognized a sword master, the sword spirit would definitely appear at the necessary moment. But Wang Ling didn't want Wang Yuan to be heard in the slightest. Thus, he had specially modified this rule to specifically target Wang Yuan. It only took 1 tear to trigger this protective effect. In the supreme world, along with Leng Ming's emerald green sword light, this barren and deathly still place seemed to glow with new vitality. The grave god was bewildered. He hadn't thought much of Leng Ming at first. It was just a small blade of heavenly tomb grass, which wasn't worthy of his surprise. But when Leng Ming appeared at that moment, the grave god had to admit that he was amazed by this blade of grass's growth. Leng Ming, who had appeared out of nowhere, looked like he had just returned from special training. He clearly had the body of a child, but he was clearly stronger than before, and he seemed to have grown a lot taller. He was wearing a grayish-green training suit with a belt tied around his waist. His whole body was filled with a kind of lively aura, like a spirit living in the forest. When the sword chi surged, Leng Ming's hair naturally floated in the air, emitting a kind of spiritual nature. With Leng Ming at the center, this barren ancient mountain was instantly covered in tender green grass. The wildfire will not be extinguished, and the spring wind will blow again. These grasses had unimaginable tenacity. In this supreme world that was filled with resentment, they were constantly being destroyed and reborn. To think that he could grow to such a level. The grave god clearly remembered Leng Ming's appearance when the Sword King realm was in chaos. It could only be said that the changes brought about by the current situation were too great. Don't you dare be presumptuous in my supreme world. The grave god became enraged. and the barren ancient mountain in front of her turned into an oasis in the blink of an eye. It made him feel extra dazzled. The graveyard goddess unleashed her final burst of power as she watched the withered and reborn grass spreading outwards like geckos. 100% of the supreme world's pressure. All of them bombarded down. In an instant, the wailing in this world grew even louder. Bitter and mournful screams and painful moans rose and fell, carrying a kind of heaven-collapsing wail. Billowing black gas surged over from the distant horizon, plunging this supreme world into an unprecedented depression. When the black gas approached, it transformed into people of all shapes and sizes. Their scarlet eyes emitted a hellish light. They were all ancient powerhouses who had been killed by the grave god. Now, they were all mobilized by the supreme world and sacrificed to become an undead army. They stood on black clouds and wore pitch-black undead armor. They were so eerie that even heaven and earth trembled. The vast undead army rushed over from afar and surrounded Wang Yuan's ancient mountain that was filled with lush greenery. There was a black mass below. Wang Yuan's ancient mountain had turned into the only oasis at this moment. It was like the last ray of light in this world that was about to be covered by endless darkness. Don't be afraid. I'll protect you. Leng Ming frowned slightly. He stretched out his strong little arm and shielded little girl Nuan behind him. His small body looked like a giant at this moment. This was also a test for Leng Ming. His first battle after returning from cultivation was already a situation like this. However, he was not frightened by the hellish scene in front of him. Instead, he kept thinking about the combat skills that his master and mistress had taught him during the special training. At the same time, he was measuring the gap between his side and the grave god's combat strength. This was the grave god's supreme world. In this world, the grave god could do anything he wanted. We can't waste time here. We have to find a way to split open this world. Leng Ming said this after some serious thought. The grave god laughed on the spot and clutched his stomach, as if he had heard the funniest joke in all of eternity. Do you think my supreme world is a watermelon? You want to split it open? Don't forget, you're just a blade of grass. Shut up. How would I know if I don't split it open? Leng Ming was in high spirits and refused to admit defeat so easily. Boom. At that moment, the undead army was even closer in the distance. The murderous aura of a deep sea of blood swept over with a destructive pressure. This was an unimaginable deterrent. Leng Ming was deeply shaken by the powerful fluctuations. He had never felt this level of pressure before. Even when he had been hit by Jinka and by Qiao's combined attacks, it hadn't seemed to be as great as this. Do you feel the gap? At that moment, the grave god slowly stretched out his hand, curled his fingers, and slowly closed his palm. With every inch of strength he exerted, the fluctuations of energy grew stronger. It felt like there was no end to it. Leng Ming started to get nervous, but he still persevered. He had come to protect Wang Yuan, and also to show off the results of his special training. He didn't want to embarrass his Shifu. Hey! At that moment, Wang Yuan slowly crawled over and lay on Leng Ming's back. The soft touch had the milky scent of a baby, and Leng Ming's little face instantly turned red. Ah, Yuan, in that instant, Leng Ming felt reassured. It wasn't just him, Wang Yuan felt the same way. Because of Leng Ming's appearance, the pressure from the supreme world had been split into two. Wang Yuan and Leng Ming were now sharing the pressure of this world equally, and had become each other's salvation. Wang Yuan didn't say a word, and hugged Leng Ming's neck like a soft plaster. In the next moment, the little girl's eyes turned sharp. Leng Ming instantly understood. The real counterattack was about to begin. Although little girl Nuan had just been born, her strategic thinking was exceptionally clear. She added the power of her shadow Dao to Leng Ming's body, and in a split second, the tender green grass that had been spreading all around them started to spread out at an extremely fast speed. The speed at which it spread was extremely astonishing, and it formed a green wave that collided with the grave god's undead army. She's actually using the shadows of these grass to counteract the withering effect. The grave god was shocked. He never thought that the little girl in front of him and that little grass would actually have such an unexpected effect. If this went on, his supreme world would be completely green. You're tuning into the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.